Welcome to my channel. Here, I don't just speak, but I invite you to think. Throughout my videos, I've questioned the deepest held beliefs, from philosophy, the dynamics of religion and faith, to personal identity. I ventured into the controversial because I know that only in honest, critical confrontation do we grow. My voice is a search for truth, unafraid of what is difficult. If you join this community today, you don't just watch, but you engage. Together, we open the door to a courageous dialogue, one that transforms us. Subscribe, share, and let's keep questioning, growing, and seeking truth together. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Yeah, I'm really excited about today's show. As many of you might know, if you've watched enough of my videos, almost every Sunday, I end up talking about the gentleman who's going to be speaking with us today, Austin. I link his videos so many times, or his channel so many times in the description of my videos, whether he's been on the panel or not. I've been very impressed with this young man. I really encourage you guys to check out his content. Check out not just his videos, but look into his posts on his community tab, because he writes a lot of really, really interesting stuff. He's a very good writer, actually. But evolution is something that I'm very passionate about. I've really been soaking up as much information about this topic as I can over the last couple of years. And Austin has been such a great resource for me personally to be able to go in and watch his content, watch some of his debates, and see how he presents the information. So when I first started doing content, because I've only been putting out videos on this channel for a few months. I think it's like December is when I really started doing this. And I think at the very beginning, I actually reached out to Austin to see if there's any way I could get him to be a guest on my channel at some point and talk about evolution. And he had agreed, but our schedules are really, both of us are very busy. So it's been difficult trying to coordinate all that, but it's finally happened. So I'm just really elated to be able to bring him on screen. I just want to go over really quick. We had a debate last night. We had a really good turnout for that debate. Does Paul contradict Jesus? Robin co-hosted that with me. She did a great job bringing up the Q&A questions and stuff like that, and keeping the chat regulated. So I really appreciate her efforts. Please do check out her channel if you guys get a chance. That's Robin Webster. I think most of you in the community know who that young lady is. She's an amazing human being. And without further ado, I think I'm going to go ahead and bring up Austin now, if I can do this correctly. I'll get a little better at this technology. So I'm going to let Austin basically introduce himself, maybe give a little bit of his background, and then we've got a slideshow presentation that Austin had made for us to help us follow along the conversation. And then afterwards, of course, we'll do the open panel like always. So Austin, let me turn it over to you, brother.
Can it really be called a slideshow? It's more just like a mountain of data, right? But yeah, no. Hello, everybody. My name is Austin Sims. I'm a biology nerd, a physics nerd, a chemistry nerd, a science nerd, a guy who loves philosophy, and a former young Earth creationist. So that's a funny thing to say in succession, right? Because normally young Earth creationists are people who really aren't that into science, right? They kind of mock science, but they also pretend to be scientific at the same time. It's interesting. But I was a young Earth creationist for a while as a child, because I grew up in this really repressive, authoritarian, theocratic community, this Southern Baptist community in the heart of Texas. And I was basically forced to be a young Earth creationist. I was caught looking at a biology book in my Sunday school class. And when the Sunday school teacher asked me why I was doing that, I spoke very frankly and honestly to her and told her that I found the Bible boring and the biology book I was reading way more interesting. And unfortunately, the page I was reading at the time was a page on reproductive anatomy. So of course she called it pornography. and my pastor flipped out, and he basically forced me into an indoctrination camp. He started keeping me after my regular Sunday school classes for a special classes where he would literally it was just me and him alone in the Sunday school classroom with a chalkboard and a TV with a VCR hooked up to it, and he would yell at me and write things on the chalkboard about Bible verses and stuff, and he would play Kent Hovind videos on the TV. And the rants were always about shit like how evolution means you're a monkey. That's just a random bag of chemicals. It means you're going to go burn in hell with all the other monkeys. And basically, I was browbeat into becoming a young Earth creationist. All of my books were confiscated. I was constantly grounded, and everything but the Bible and a couple of other religious books. And that was all I was allowed to read. They took all my toys, so I didn't have any toys to play with. And a lot of time I would just sit in my room and just stare at the wall between me and my mom's room, knowing that all my books were on the other side of that wall and I couldn't read them. And when I finally realized, I needed to just accept this young Earth creationism stuff and become a good Christian, like my mom and my pastor wanted me to, all my books were returned except for my biology books. And so I went apoplectic. I lost my mind. I threw tantrums. No punishments didn't work anymore. They could spank me and ground me as much as they wanted. I didn't freaking care because they took the one thing I cared about, even after I did everything they wanted. And so my mom got really, really worried, and she got really to her wit's end. And so she called my grandma in to help. And I guess she thought because my grandma was a Universalist Unitarian pastor that my grandma would be on her side, but she was actually freaking livid. She was furious that I was basically being mind fucked. And she demanded that the special lessons end. She demanded that all my books be returned. My mom was really embarrassed. My grandma actually moved in with us for a while, and she started taking me on weekend trips to the zoo every week. And yeah, we would talk about the animals, and she would explain things to me, and she would answer my questions frankly. And she explained that the Bible was a religious text. It wasn't really a science text. It's supposed to answer questions about the salvation of your soul and the mind of God. It's not really about explaining the world. God gave us the world, and we're supposed to go out and explore it ourselves, and all the typical theistic evolutionist philosophy. And she basically just slowly and gently unraveled the mind fucking and abuse. And she showed me these. Basically, what she did is she showed me all the data that had been hidden from me, and she allowed me to explore it without being terrified. Because up to that point, everybody else was telling me that my curiosity was evil, that Satan, an evil spirit, had gotten a hold of me, and I'm crazy about the monkey bones. And it's like, oh my God. But she actually encouraged my curiosity instead of telling me it was evil, that it was lazy, that it was proudful and arrogant, and that I was rejecting the word of God. She actually explained to me that I wasn't rejecting the word of God. I was actually looking at the world that God made and learning about God's world with a clear and open mind. And yeah, it was just, it was like the most loving thing that she could do for me with what she had at her disposal, which is just that she was an educator for 30 years, so she knew something about it. And her husband, my grandfather, was a sociologist who worked for Harvard, Yale, and Columbia University. So he sure as heck knew a lot about it too. And yeah, they just kind of helped undo all the brainwashing. And I went from being like a young Earth creationist to an old Earth creationist to an intelligent design type, and then like a theistic evolutionist. And then finally I just dropped theism entirely. Like I guess now you could call me like an agnostic atheist. And that's pretty much the story. There's more to it, but that's like, and it was a long time ago, so I'm sure some of the details are off a little bit. Like, yeah.
Well, the story has a happy ending because you came out the other side. You know,
Yeah.
that's the most important part. And I think that it's really important for people who watch this video. I was talking to Austin backstage before we started, and I asked if he wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that background because as I was telling him, you know, a lot of people when they deny this science, this evolution, and they do it for theistic reasons,
Hmm.
their God beliefs and stuff like that. They look at people like Austin as an enemy, an arch enemy, really, because they see evolution as being one of the most powerful arguments against God. And in a way, it can be, depending what your view of God is. But you know, when you understand, when you actually get to know somebody like Austin, and I think this is actually true of most people. This is what the people who deny this science. It's really it's conspiracy level, flat Earth level bullshit, in my opinion. I'm not trying to be so disrespectful, but I just don't know how else to put it because there's this idea that all these scientists worldwide have this conspiracy against God, that they're going to invent this thing called evolution, which is absolutely insane. If you just step back from the situation long enough to really think about what you're saying to yourselves, you know, you're convincing yourselves of. People like Austin are the rule, not the exception. Most people who are skeptics used to be believers. That's just a fact. So, you know, you could do the research. And it's also a fact that about 93% of the people on the planet are religious. So these scientists are not God haters just because they're scientists. People who talk about evolution are not anti-God or anti-religion per se, just because they study the science behind evolution. That's such a straw man, and it's poisoning the well. And it's an excuse that people give themselves to just hand wave away the actual evidence and not have to confront the data. So the data is what we're here to talk about today. I'm not going to be doing as much talking because this is really Austin's wheelhouse. I brought him on to put, you know, make as much of a presentation as he's comfortable with, and I'll chime in where I can. But I just want you guys to understand that this is not an attack on religion. This is a promotion of science. Those are two separate ideas, right? So you need to be able to separate yourself from that. Don't just tie these things together. Just take the science for what it is, because people who deny this science will also deny climate change science, and that's extremely dangerous, right? We're starting to see the effects of that in just the short 50 years that I've been on this planet. I've seen people, they were talking about this when I was a small child, this thing called climate change, and all the religious people were like, no, this is God made this planet. This planet's so big, we can't destroy it. We're just like ants on this planet, you know. And now 50 years later, we're starting to say, holy shit, we're really fucking this planet up bad. We've got to do something about it. So if you'll deny one field of science, you'll deny all the fields of science. But then when you get sick, you go to the hospital, you know, you get in your car and turn your key, and that's an explosive device. So it's very hypocritical how people live their lives and then what comes out of their mouths. So anyway, without all that, let me go ahead and bring up some of these slides here. Austin, do you just call out, well, if you happen to want to go in any particular order, tell me what slide number to select. I'll let you take over from here.
Well, no, I figured we would just go through the slides one at a time. I think you've organized them beautifully, so let's just do it sequentially. And if there's certain key ones that I think will come up in the open panel, I'll just I might ask you to shout out the number of the slide for me so I can write it down so we can bring it back up.
Oh, that's perfect. That's Austin sent me a number of these images I just put together in a little PowerPoint here, and I was really fascinating for me to just go through these and look at each one of them. I started with this one because I thought this was actually hilarious, and this says it all right here, this particular slide.
Yeah. So these are like Rhipidiscians. These are lungfish. They have tiny little air sucking bladders in their chests, as well as gills. And they also have these loby fins that let them walk on land better than some of their ray-finned compatriots. So those would be called actinopterygians. These are your sarcopterygians. And sarcopterygians eventually give rise to tetrapods, the four-limbed organisms that we are, and that a lot of the animals on the planet are. And these ones are especially fascinating because they have those lungs, they have that tetrapodal form, and they're capable of surviving in two very different environments, right? We're talking about complete submersion in water and being completely unsubmerged, being out in the air. And boy, does that oxygen hit good, right? Like we can all relate to that. And not only do you have fish that can walk on land, I was sharing this with Daniel before we went live. There are fish that can climb trees. And what I love about that is I can't remember who it was. I think it was Einstein said something about if you try to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will go through its whole life thinking it's stupid. Turns out there are fish that can do that. And yeah, so get good if you want to be as good as evolution. Like evolution can produce a fish that can climb a tree, which stumps Einstein's question, right?
That is amazing. That's really funny.
Yeah, so this is like this picture is so deep. Like it doesn't seem that deep on the surface of it, but we're looking at so much here. We're looking at maxillofacial symmetry between two species. We're looking at general facial symmetry between two species, nasal symmetry, cranial symmetry, behavioral symmetry, right? Look at how this baby primate that she's holding responds to her body language as if this were her, its sincere maternal figure. We all relate to being cuddled by our moms and being loved on and laughed at and cuddling and giggling and having a good time. And it's amazing to see that that behavior can bridge the species gap, and common ancestry makes a lot of sense of that. Yeah, I used to think that Bible confirms evolution in old Earth. I kind of thought that for a while. I think if you try to make the Bible fit reality, you're probably doing okay. If you're trying to make reality fit the Bible, things get a little dicey.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction. That's such an important distinction because I do think that religion can serve a beneficial a purpose to people's lives, depending on what we're talking about, And so, doing it in the way that you said, make the Bible fit reality. That's far more productive than doing it
Mhm.
the other way around. I really like how you said that.
Now, this one's beautiful because, again, we're seeing that behavioral symmetry, we're seeing that morphological symmetry, and this one goes beyond just showing us parents playing. Who hasn't done this with their mom or dad, right? Playing airplane with mom or dad, they put you on their feet and they hold you up with their hands, and you roll around and pretend like you're flying through the air. And we can do this because of the similarity of our morphology, the similarity of our biology. And behavior is one of the things that makes a species. Are we really that separate from this species? I don't think so. I think we're really, really close to this species.
This slide really resonates with me actually right at this time because just like less than 48 hours ago, I had posted some kind of comment on something I watched on YouTube. I can't remember what it was, but somebody had responded to me. How is it that a bunch of atoms, or how is it that you think a bunch of atoms can form to develop empathy? And this is exactly what we're seeing right here. We see empathy, we see emotions coming from what we would call animals, even though technically we're all animals, right?
Mhm.
And this is evidence of how that works. And for people to say that a bunch of atoms and to just hand wave away life, which is what they're doing, right? The beauty of nature by hand waving away and trying to reduce it to a bunch of atoms, quote unquote. And I was like, you really need to look into biology and the evolution of these emotions and where these emotions come from in the brain, the amygdala, the limbic system, right? Where our empathy and our emotions actually come from, because we see empathy and emotions in animal species all over the place, especially when it comes
Absolutely.
to the social species, right?
So life is basically a system that entropy and energy flows through. And one of the faucets it flows through is experimenting with new behaviors. And the organism that's capable of that is going to outlast organisms that aren't. plain and simple.
Mhm.
This I love because like so many evolution deniers will scream, "Where's the evidence for evolution?" And this chart just shuts that right up, because here it is, right? This is as visible as evidence can get, almost. What are we looking at here? We're looking at primates. We're looking at hominids. We're looking at uh, several cascades of features in development, right? Like we're looking at the brain volume. The brain pan is increasing as the age of the fossil decreases. We're looking at prognathism, the slant of the face decreasing as the age of the fossil decreases. And we're looking at the foramen magnum, the opening at the bottom of the skull, which is a strong indication of the anatomical like formation, how it walks. Because if it's walking upright, that foramen magnum is going to be more anterior, right? Because you can just think about it logistically. If that foramen magnum was in the back of the head, it would be looking straight up at the sky. Here, I'll put myself on camera. If you got the foramen magnum at the back of the head, it's going to walk around looking at the sky like this. It'll have to arch its body forward to be able to see in front of it and look to its sides. Whereas if it's at the bottom, it can walk around like us bipedal humans can, where I don't have to bend my body forward to look straight ahead of me. And I mean, pretty much looking down at my legs would be out of the question. Uh, so that is three different features of the morphology of these skulls that literally leads up to anatomically modern humans, with their anterior foramen magnums, their frustrums, their bipedalism, their big brains, and their less slanted faces, and their protruding chins. Interestingly, that's something that other primate species don't have. We have this little jutting chin here. Other species don't have that.
This is probably one of my favorite slides that you sent me. There's actually some really cool pictures throughout this whole presentation, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. But this is actually one of my favorite ones because to me, when I look at this, it is so obvious that you're seeing an evolution of design, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like there's literally like a progression of features, and it's so apparent. But when I have seen evolution deniers look at a picture like this and say they don't see any evidence for evolution. All they see is a bunch of skulls. I've literally heard Kanisha from Teach Yahweh on her channel say this. And I'm thinking to myself, you've got to be actively denying this, because what you don't see in real life, what nobody's ever seen and has never been recorded in history, is an animal popping up out of the dirt, which is what they want you to believe, that God made all these animals out of the dirt or out of the thin air, right? Like ex nihilo or something like that. But we've never seen it. Even in the Bible, it doesn't say anybody's witnessed this. If you want to get technical, right? Moses is supposedly writing the book of Genesis, and he supposedly gets this, secondhand from either God or the Holy Spirit, or however you want to interpret that. But Adam doesn't write any of this down. And it doesn't say anywhere that Adam even saw these animals coming up out of the dirt. Nobody's ever seen an animal just pop up out of the dirt fully formed. That's completely ridiculous. But they want to talk about, well, nobody's seen this evolution. It's billions and billions and billions of years and stuff like that. It's like, well, when did you see something pop up out of the dirt? Never. It's never been recorded. You know what I mean? So it's such a double standard that people use. You look at something like this and it's obvious. I mean, it cannot get more obvious than a picture like this that shows this progression over time.
Yeah, so what you can ask an evolution denier is whether or not they think these are just skulls. What is this data like? Does this fit a model of uh, a foundational species diversifying into multiple different species over time? And absolutely it does. And that's kind of the case with all the data. We know the data fits the model. And that's a real headache for creationists. So they've gotta come up with some angle. And so bad faith is a really easy option. Just no, this evidence doesn't count. This is just skulls. And that was one of the ways Kent Hovind mind fucked me when I was a kid. he convinced me that was true. Oh, a fossil, the only thing a fossil tells you is that an organism died. It doesn't mean anything else. They don't come with a date stamped on them. And that kind of logic is just so stupid and silly because by that logic, oh, it had orbitals. That doesn't tell you that it had eyes. Could have been anything in there. Maybe it used those as cucumber holders, right? Like, we've only ever seen organisms with orbitals using them to house eyes, but we don't know that that means that those were eyes, right? It's really nonsense because fossils tell you lots of things. The anterior foramen magnum tells you how it's probably walking. The orbitals tell you it had eyes. The ribs tell you it had lungs.
I didn't know we were going to get such an incredible comedic impersonation of Kent Hovind in this presentation.
Man.
I thought it was going to be straight science. That was epic, bro. I've heard some pretty good ones. Mark Reed does a pretty good one, actually. Joe, the Kentucky Atheist, he does a pretty good Kent Hovind impersonation. But God, that was maybe the best one I've heard so far. That was absolutely bro.
Thank
that
you.
was so funny.
Okay, so this picture, what it's illustrating is that everywhere you have a bone on your body, most other primate species have that exact same bone. For chimpanzees, they have the same bone, period. Panins, so chimps and bonobos and the suite of species in that cluster, they all have the exact same bones. Not only do they have every spot that you have a bone, they have the exact same bones, tendons, joints, and muscles. So everywhere you have a muscle, they have that same muscle. Everywhere you have a tendon, they have that same tendon. Everywhere you have a joint or a bone, they have that same joint or bone. And you can see that here. And the only real difference is like the shape, the density of it, and specific features that code for bipedalism, like the foramen magnum. Because bipedalism is the most recent development. I think it's either bipedalism or the chin, one of those two. Yeah, here we go. So this chart is great because this clears up a really dense area of confusion in a beautiful way, right? Just visual display of the data. And what we're looking at here is a genomic comparison. We're looking at humans, orangutans, siamungs, mice, and zebrafish. And what we're seeing is how much of the codons and exons are the same. Sorry, how much of the exons and interons are the same. Codons and exons are technically the same thing. How much of the exons and interons are the same. So between two humans, as you can see, about 100% similarity, right? Which is about what you'd expect. They're the same species. Humans have way more recent a common ancestor than a human and an orangutan would. But you can see the similarity is still really high. And what that breaks down to is things like our cytochrome C sequences are 100% the same. Like there's not a single difference in the 144 amino acids that make up our cytochrome C. And that includes a broken pseudogene that is an adaptation that occurred when chimpanzees and humans common ancestors started eating so much fruit that it didn't need to make its own vitamin C anymore. Fruit was such a major part of its diet that it was getting all the vitamin C it needed from the fruit it was eating. And so when that gene broke, there was no selective pressure to filter out those broken genes and repair it. And so we share that broken pseudogene. And it's a really strong argument against intelligent design, right? Or common design, because why would a designer put broken genes into his perfect organism, right? The thing that's made in his image. Why would he give it a broken pseudogene that can't make vitamin C anymore? It makes zero sense under design, but it makes perfect sense under evolution, as does pretty much everything we're seeing in this chart. The level of general genomic similarity, and especially the specific genomic similarities, things like captured viral DNA. So When germline cells, when sperm or eggs get infected by viruses, every descendant that germline cell has, if it manages to go on to become a complete organism, will have that viral DNA inside of it. And through this process, about 8% of our genome is captured viral DNA. You are a virus. Turns out, what's his name? Agent Smith in the Matrix movie was right. At least 8% right. And what's interesting is once that viral DNA is captured inside of your genome, it replicates like any other DNA, which is that about 80% of your genome, the nucleotide identity sequences that compose your genetics, most of those are just biochemical scaffolding. They don't actually code for a protein, and they don't affect the regions that do. You could remove or change them, and they have no effect on the phenotype, the actual body form of the organism. And so this is like all stuff that just makes zero sense under creationism or intelligent design, and makes perfect sense under evolution, because you have these captured viral DNA. Not only are they in there, they also jumped around to different spots. They got broken and they got repaired. And we not only share the insertion locuses, we share those breaks and repairs with other organisms. So that it's normally in science, you don't say something can be proven. It can only be supported with evidence and provisionally proven. This almost rises to the level of proof, because this is an example of mathematical proof, and math is almost one of the only areas you can have proof in. It's virtually statistical proof of common ancestry, because the chances of those uh, viruses even being viral sequences even being inserted into the same area is 1 over a number larger than the number of atoms in the universe. It's asymptotically 0. But once you take into account the common breakages and repairs, it becomes impossible. It's just 0% possibility. So it is proof of common ancestry. And some scientists would agree with me and say that that rises to the level of proof. I can give you some of the names of scientists that would agree that it rises to the level of proof. So, for instance, John Peters, Dr. John Peters, he's an entomologist and an evolutionary biologist. I think Larry Moran is on the train with saying this is proof of macroevolution and common ancestry. So yeah, this chart sums all of this up in a beautiful way, and it helps clarify the conversation, because it is true that you can evaluate the genome in multiple different ways and get different numbers. And this chart helps clear that up with the 3 different ways it's showing it. It's showing the pink lines, it's showing the purple lines, and it's showing the black line of what's actually expressed codon biases. And you can see the things that are actually expressed are the ones that are most commonly held.
I was looking into something the other day. I've been following Gutsit Gibbon. I'm sure you know she is a really
Great.
smart young lady.
Easily
Really
one of my top 3 YouTubers on the subject of evolution, period. Like her, Aaron Ra, Dr. Dan, Forrest Valkai, Professor Dave. They'd probably be top 5.
She was she was having a debate against a creationist, probably a young earth creationist actually,
Yeah.
who was supposedly a scientist himself. And of course he was hand waving away all the evidence and stuff. But it was really interesting. In fact, it really relates to this slide here as well. There we go. Because she asked him, she says, so if you just say evolution was true, what kind of evidence would you expect to see? And he literally said, well, we would expect to see similarities in the fossil record. And she's like, wait a minute, I just showed you 4 slides of that, 20 minutes ago. What are you talking about? This is the kind of stuff that you would expect to see if evolution were true. I was something called endogenous retroviruses were brought up, and I kind of did a quick scan so I could kind of follow the conversation and stuff. And they have these what they call HERVs, which is human endogenous retroviruses. It's a way of grouping these together. And in class 1, what they call the human HREVs, like HREVW or H, for example, related to gamma retroviruses, they're among the oldest groups and are present across the entire primate lineage.
Yeah, that's that captured viral DNA I was talking about. Endogenous retroviruses are an example of that. Yeah, and
And they're
it's
they're
they're
gonna say
really
this is what we would expect to see, and you show it to them, and they're like, I don't see anything except a bunch of skulls,
yeah.
it's a bunch of bones. It's like, wait a minute, you literally just said, you know, that's what you would expect to see, and now that I'm showing you, you're gonna move the goalpost to cucumber holders or whatever you said before with the eye
Right, yeah.
sockets. That was so funny.
Yeah. So, like, gosh, it's tough because we don't want to overwhelm the audience with too many points for them to absorb. But I'll give you two more quick points on this. So yeah. So like, what were we talking about? We were talking about the the skulls, right? So fuck, I lost my train of thought. I'm really tired, y'all. I'm very slap happy today. That's probably
Well,
gonna happen.
it may come back to us as
Yeah, I'll let you know if it comes back to me. Oh, okay. So we're going straight into whale evolution. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so whale evolution. This is like so fascinating. It's one of my favorite lines. So you have this chart here, and this chart is the basic progression from a tiny, not tiny, but much smaller, uh, like wolf-sized land artiodactyl, even-toed ungulate quadrupedal land mammal, right? And it's going from that to being the most massive megafauna ocean mammal there is, the freaking blue whale, the humpback whale, the odontocetes and baleen whales, the toothed and non-toothed whales of the ocean, which is actually kind of a misnomer to call them non-toothed because it turns out all whales grow teeth at one point in their life. It's just other species don't develop them beyond fetal stages. So this is a fantastic chart of the current taxonomy, and it also kind of shows how the history of the whale evolution line developed, because we theorized that there would be some kind of artiodactyl land mammal type thing in the Pakistan area before all the species that you see on this chart were found, right? So they start looking around Pakistan, and that's where they find Pakicetus, that one near the top, the artiodactyl land mammal that we think either is the common ancestor of all modern whales or something really close to it. And what's like, this is a really great chart because it's succinct. So you get the overall argument. But what's great is there's like 200 plus species of these things that aren't included on the chart. Like this chart doesn't even include what's called the Remingtons today. Remington today. It's tough to say. So they're in the cetacean group. So they're called Cetidae. So it's combining Remington and Cetidae into Remington today or something like that. It's Remingtonidae. It's really close, but it's kind of hard to say. And there's all these species, and they show even more of the adaptation. So Pakicetus starts off being a quadrupedal, even-toed ungulate land mammal. It's got its snout pointing forward. It's got a typical mammal tail, and it's got typical mammal limbs. So it's got a limb that's composed of a humerus, a radius, and an ulna, and that's the forelimb, rather. And then carpals, metacarpals, proximal, intermediate, and distal phalanges. And then the hind limbs are composed of a femur, a fibula, and a tibula, and a fibula and a tibia, rather. Sorry, I always get those. You know what I mean. And then tarsals, metatarsals, and the foot phalanges. And so as you go down this chart, that form is slowly changing, but it's still staying basally similar in another aspect, and that even by the time you get to the whales, the forelimb is still a humerus, a radius, and an ulna, carpals, metacarpals, proximal, intermediate, and distal phalanges, and the hind limb has attenuated to just vestigials of the original uh, hind limb of the artiodactyl land mammal. You can still see, though, and we'll get into that in the other slides. Do you know which slide coming up has the whale hind limb bones on it?
Yeah, I think it actually.
Yeah, there we go. The pelvis.
I put it in.
There we go. That's the pelvis. That's the vestigial pelvis. But the hind limb bones are on another one. That's the involved. Yeah, this one.
Yep. So this right here, I don't know if the audience can see, but when he's talking about when Austin's talking about the humerus, the radius, and ulnus, that's actually the arm bone. So this would be like the upper arm, the radius.
That would be the femur, the fibula, and the tibula, right? Is that the upper arm? I think that's the hind limb.
Oh, is this the hind? Okay.
Yeah, Basilosaurus hind limb.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's the femur, the tibia, and the fibula, and then the tarsals, the metatarsals, and the phalanges. Yep. And then in the modern whale hind limb,
so this would be another.
Yep. That's just a funny meme.
Okay.
Yeah, we can move on from this slide. The point I wanted to make about the hind limb, and so we can skip that slide when we get to it, is that if you look at the modern whale vestigial hind limb bones, they look exactly like what it would look like if you took the ancestral form and just cut it right in half, down to the point that it still has the ball and socket joint in it.
And this is out of a whale, not a human. Not that's that, but you can see the similarity, even though it's that far removed. Yep, on the evolutionary ladder. That's how long it takes for these things to develop. It takes it's such a process. That's why people have such a hard time really comprehending it, because they try to imagine it in these short chunks. And they use words like irreducible complexity, which isn't actually a thing in evolution. It's not.
I don't think it's a thing in reality.
No, it isn't. Anything that has a function, right? The functions can change. So even their little stupid mousetrap thing, the spring can be used for a multitude of different applications before it was ever put into the mousetrap. It doesn't have to, just become a mousetrap with a spring and a mechanism and a lever and everything. A lever can have a separate function. A spring can have a separate function. The piece of wood can have a separate function, So that's how evolution works, right? If something has a particular function, and that function can develop into a new function, or it could continue on and become a better, more efficient function with time, if the environment selects for it, right?
No, sorry, Robin. No whale penises in this presentation. That's one of Kent Hovind's favorite things to talk about.
As close as you're going to get, Robin, to this. This isn't a show about sperm whales. Come on now.
All right, so this here is Dorudon. This is one of the whale ancestors. As you can see, it's got those little tiny hind limbs back there. They're so small at this point that they aren't even attached to the spine anymore. So that means that even if those limbs were on the living organism, it couldn't do shit with them. They're just hanging limp and useless. And that is why a pressure would exist to just get rid of them completely. More streamlined, less wasted protein on a form that's just hanging limp off the main body. Mycetes, this one's beautiful. I don't think this one made it into the chart, so I threw it in there especially. This one is, you can still see how it's a land animal, but you can also see the same basic skeletal form that you're going to have in the final whale, like Dorudon, which is way closer to the final whale. It's just a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger, and it doesn't have as pronounced hind limbs. This one's great. A lot of the credit for these photos goes to John Peters. I'm really riding his coattails hard in this live stream. He put a lot of this data together, and so what this is showing is it's showing the migration of the nasal cavity aperture to the top of the skull. And what this does for the organism as it's adapting to being more fully aquatic is it's allowing for more efficient kinematics. This organism that has the blowhole closer to the top of its head can breathe easier and more efficiently and with less effort. So it drowns less. And so selection does its thing. It cludges together the mutations that are moving the nasal cavity up the skull until we get modern whales and modern dolphins with blowholes. And Robin, I don't have any whale penises prepared, but here's a little dolphin penis fact. Dolphins are one of the gayest species out there. Dolphins love gaying it up, and dolphins actually pair bond monogamously. So there are gay dolphins that have husbands. And
That is so cool. I did
the
not know
gay
that.
dolphins, they make love to their husbands' blowholes. Let's see that in some high school science textbooks. Anyways,
That is actually really fascinating.
it is, isn't it? Yep. And so what we're seeing here, this is that's true, Robin. They are very grapey. So this is hilarious. About a dozen people a year report being graped by dolphins, which is, I mean, I guess that's hilarious is a bad word for it, but it's funny to me because, like, not only are that many people getting assaulted by dolphins, that many people think the police could do something about that. Like, you can walk into the police station and be like, a dolphin molested me, and they'll pull out some photo album full of mugshots of dolphins, and they'll be like, well, can you point out the dolphin who did it to you? Oh, Tufin Tony, yeah, we know him. We'll pick him up, you know. Yes,
As a side note, I don't know why I'm sharing this story. It's kind of embarrassing. It was so funny though. It's many years ago. My wife and I had Chihuahuas, and I had a party at my house. I had a barbecue, and one of my buddies got a little bit too drunk, and he was kind of half passed out there, sitting in the chair. And for some reason, I don't know what the deal was, but one of my Chihuahuas went over and started humping his leg. And my wife and I are like trying to yell at the dog to get off him without waking up my buddy because we were so embarrassed, you know. And my buddy, he kind of comes to, he looks down, and my dog is just going to town on his leg, you know, and he goes, friendly little guy, isn't he?
So what we're seeing here, when dolphins and cetaceans are developing in utero as fetuses, they develop all kinds of features that are more clues of the phylogeny, right? So they not only develop hind limb buds, also their nasal aperture, it starts off in front of their face like their ancestor, like Pakicetus would have had, and over the development of the fetus it migrates to the top of the head. And what we're seeing is embryonic development recapitulating evolutionary development. That's just so fascinating. It's
That
like
is, and
it's
what
one of
period of
those
time?
examples of consilience of evidence that, like, if you're really going to deny this, it just does take straight up bad faith.
And we're talking about a very short period of time, right? Like how many months does it take for this fetal stage to happen?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure actually. I think it's 9 months. Is it? You know what? Let me check real quick.
Because that's really amazing that they can make that significant of a change in just 9 months. So if that can happen, then you don't need, you know, it doesn't take billions and billions of years for simple changes or even bigger changes necessarily. I mean, 9 months, look at the difference of where that breathing apparatus is actually positioned from the front of the face all the way down to the top of the head. That's a significant move anatomically. And that's just
Uh,
in a handful of months.
not 9 months, but close. Like it depends on the species, but like 11 to 12 months.
That's still amazing. That
Yeah.
is amazing.
Some can be shorter, like 10 to 11 months. It tends to correlate with size. So like an orca will take longer, like 15 months.
And this is that image of that. Now, is this at this point what we would consider vestigial stage?
Yes.
No
So
longer got
so
function.
yes, and this also counters a common like creationist talking point. So these atavistic pelvis and leg bones, they're not even really attached to any spinal muscles anymore, so or any nerves or spine, like the spine in any way, but they are still attached to muscles and tendons that are attached to the reproductive organs in males. So that has preserved some form of them. They're no longer capable of doing what the ancestor used them for, using them as a quadruped walking on land, but they still help direct the genitals of the males in the species that have retained them in sexual congress. It helps them achieve sexual contact, and it helps them have sex underwater.
And I think the most fascinating thing about the whales and stuff is that, we're seeing evolution work both ways, from water to land, from land back
Mhm.
to the sea. And that's really important.
And this is one of the things you can love about biology, is that it's like the only place where you get to talk about sex on, and nobody's like, what a pervert, man. Like, we're supposed to talk about it. Like philosophers are writing these super long books about the meaning of life, and to a biologist the meaning of life is just folding up a good looking girl and taking her to town. Anyways, I'll stop being a perv. um so the
Oh,
involucre.
you're in the right house, brother.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I like being able to talk frankly about sex. I think it's something that humans probably just need to get over it, and accept that everybody has sex their own way, and as long as they're not hurting anybody, it's fucking fine. Just fucking chill and mind your own business, and don't even be a dick about it. Like, just don't fucking shit on somebody else just because they're different from you.
Yeah, I have a background. I used to actually work in the adult industry, and while I'm not proud of those times of my life, it's you know, like, people, sex is a natural part of life, and people who are uncomfortable talking about it are denying themselves a whole part of life that well, I don't want to get too much into the sex thing, but we don't kink shame around here. I'll just put it that way.
One of my favorite jokes of all time is about sex, but it's a long one, so we won't go into it. Maybe I'll tell it in the open panel. So this is the involucrum, right? This is a structure in the skull of the whales, and it's basically an ear bone. That's kind of simplifying things a little bit, but it's good enough for the sake of the conversation. And what it is it's an ear bone that's only found in modern whales and the entire whale ancestor species lineage. So this is like really dead to rights evidence that all the animals in that first chart. Actually, yeah. Can you roll back up to the first chart and give me the number of that one?
This one here, number 9 or
Yeah.
number 7. This is number 7.
Whale lineage number 7. Okay. And which number is the one with the nasal apertures?
Then this one here.
Yeah.
This is number 10.
Number 10. But this is a really good clue that all those whales you see in the slide number 7 chart are actually whales, and not just those, but all the Remington Cetidae and the Pachycetidae and the Ambulocetidae that didn't make it on this chart, the over 200 plus species that can't fit onto a simple, easy chart with nice diagrams and illustrations that show you all the important things. And then, yeah, here we go. We see not only the similarity between whales and their archaeodactyl, even-toed, ungulate, quadrupedal land mammal ancestors, we see their similarity between them and us. that humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, proximate, intermediate, and distal phalanges form. The one bone, two bones, many bones form. And this exists all over the animal kingdom, and we'll go into that later. Assuming we get to that. How long do you usually do the presentations before you get into the open panel? Do you do like an hour of presenting and then open panel?
It's flexible. It's basically based on what the guest schedule will allow for. I try to keep the streams to around 3 hours total, just because I do stuff around the house. But it's pretty flexible. I don't have a set time necessarily, so it's really up to you.
What's the total number of slides? Because we're only on 16.
I think we go to 24 total.
Okay,
24, 25.
Good. We're trucking then. Okay, we'll probably get through it all. Good. Okay, so these what we're seeing here, and in the next picture, I think. Yep. So whales, cetaceans, they aren't the only land mammals that evolved back into water. Here are two other examples. We're looking at sirenians and pinnipeds. Sirenians being things like manatees, and pinnipeds being things like seals. And they both evolved from a different class of mammals, from the artiodactyls that whales evolved from. They evolved from, I believe the pinnipeds evolved from carnivorans, and gosh, I can't remember what the sirenians evolved from right now. Maybe also carnivorans. But what we're seeing is, if you go back to the previous slide, we're seeing really pronounced fingernails, right, on the forelimbs of the sirenians and pinnipeds. And in the next slide, it's almost like Buddy's showing them off for us. He's like, hey, check out my dope-ass fingernails. I can't really use them for fucking anything anymore. But I have them because my ancestors did. And I can kind of dig in the dirt with them a little bit. And so they don't really even have to be that pronounced. And that's why I still have them. And probably one of my descendants isn't going to have them anymore. Another fun fact, Sirenians are named Sirenians because, you might know this, Daniel, seamen, pirates, and sailors, when they had been out on the ocean for a long time, the legend is they used to mistake manatees for women. That's the legend is that's where the myth of the mermaid comes from.
Right.
Was
Absolutely.
horny sailors mistaking manatees for women's. So they're called Sirenians after the siren.
That is true. It's really interesting what happens to a group of men when you isolate them for a period of time. It's not pretty because it's not always consensual. We'll just leave it at that.
And this is the whale genomes, slide 18. I'm going to write that one down.
And number 18.
So what this is showing is, in a similar way to the human genomics chart, this is showing that whales and hippos are as similar to each other as one species of whales is to another species of whales. And that makes perfect sense because hippo morphology and whale morphology and the taxonomy is all extremely similar. They're both craniates, chordates, vertebrates, tetrapods, mammals, therians. Hippos also have very similar skin. They have a very similar environment. They're also capable of having sex and giving live birth underwater, and they're capable of nursing their young underwater, as well as the fact that they're more genetically similar to whales than whales are to any other species. Oh, also, go back real quick to the genomics chart. Also, what this shows is that whales and hippos are most similar. Well, whales and whales are most similar. Then whales and hippos are most similar. Then whales and artiodactyls are most similar. Then whales and therians, whales and mammals, whales and chordates, whales and blah, 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 and on and on and on. That old basal taxonomic phylogeny stack, which all the mammal phylogenies are piled up on top of, including our own. Yep, the vestigial pelvis bones. We talked about this a little bit, but we can what we can touch on real quick is the fact that this still has the remnants of an ilium, an ischium, and a pubis. They're just all unfused now. Literally, they're just not connected anymore. Not that hard of a change to achieve. And then here we talked about this already. This is a baleen whale, which is not an odontocete. It's not a toothed whale, but it still develops teeth when it's a fetus, and the baleen plates just take over them in later expression of the genome. Okay, moving on to horse evolution. This one is like we don't really have to go that deep into it if there's no horse evolution deniers in the audience, because even the creationists have thrown in the towel on this one. That's what this slide is. This is a statement from the Answers in Genesis project to create a creationist alternative to taxonomy that they call baraminology. And basically what this slide says, to shorten it, they're admitting that all of the horse ancestors, yeah, they're all the same kind. They all are related, which is pretty much admitting horse evolution. It's not only admitting horse evolution, it's admitting horse evolution, and it's also admitting quietly, because they don't come right out and say this, because of course they don't. They're also admitting tapir evolution, because tapirs share a common ancestor with horses. Yep, this isn't really exactly the way that horse evolution is presented anymore, but like the other chart, this kind of shows the history of how horse evolution emerged. You can see at the top, you have the modern horse, which is a plains running grazer with a hoofed foot. And at the bottom, you see a tiny forest dweller that chews on leaves that has an unhoofed foot. And in between, you see all the stages that evolved the stage on the bottom into the stage on the top. And this is still a good argument. It's just not exactly the truth, because there's a lot more species now and it's more bushy than a straight line. But again, it's still so well supported that even the creationists have thrown in the towel on it and said, yeah, okay, fine, evolutionists. They evolved. Yeah. And so this is the horse phalanges. So you know that humerus, radius, ulna, metacarpals, or carpals, metacarpals. Yeah, horses have that too. They have it too. You might not be able to tell by just looking at them, but once you see the bones, you can absolutely see that they have in the forelimbs the humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, phalanges, and in the hind limbs they have the femur, tibia, fibula, and the tarsals, metatarsals, phalanges. And what's happened is the phalanges on the sides have been pushed off to the side, and the phalange in the middle's gotten a lot bigger, and the keratinous adjutment has developed into a hoof. It's really just a fingernail. Yep, the claspers. Yep.
Okay.
Oh yeah, okay. And this is it. This is the pentadactyl limb. This is the limb that we keep talking about, and you can see it in humans, you can see it in whales, you can see it in birds, you can see it in bats, you can see it in horses, you can see it in cats and dogs. You can see it for all these different purposes: grasping, manipulating objects, flying, running, swimming, stampeding across the plains. And what this shows is common ancestry, straight up. Like the idea that a designer would take something that isn't specifically suited to that form and just tweak it so it's just good enough doesn't really make much sense, but it makes perfect sense from a common ancestry viewpoint. That this is a form that the ancestor of all these different species had, and it just populations of it got adapted to specific purposes over time and slowly diverged into this kaleidoscopic array we see before us. And it takes a little bit of imagination to figure that out, but not a lot. Not really. The evidence is doing most of the legwork there.
And it also shows something that something I think I learned this from you actually, but this really is good evidence. And what we've been seeing throughout the slideshow is that natural selection is not random, right? There's a specific purpose and a methodology to why each trait is being selected for. Whereas mutation can be random, but when it comes to actually natural selection, it's not just some completely random process that all these atoms came together and happened to form this functional limb, for example, or an eyeball. It just doesn't work that way. There's an actual selection process that's happening there, a natural selection process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a big part of the history of evolution, right? People could see visible mutations. They could see things like changes in pigmentation, shortening of limbs, or lengthening of limbs. They selected for it, right? We selected for things like that while we were domesticating the canine suite of species. We just didn't understand how those mutations could add up to novel features or really, really fundamentally different, but still kind of the same body plans. And that was what Darwin and Wallace explained. Like, people think Darwin and Wallace were the origination of the evolution debate. No, they were not. They just came along and explained natural selection, how random mutations could be kludged together into entirely new suites of species, which still fits to this day. Okay, this one's fun. I like this one because if you like dinosaurs and you like geography, this is one of the ways you can access evolution without having to be a biology nerd like me. Like, lots of people love dinosaurs. And this is a specific group of dinosaurs called the sauropods. So if you watch Jurassic Park, they talked about the sauropods a lot and they showed them a lot. And what this is showing is not only the morphology of sauropod evolution, it's also showing how it fits biogeography. So the distribution of these species fits our understanding of geography developing from a Pangean supercontinent into the disparate, separated continents we see today. Again, it's an example of like just overwhelming consilience of evidence. Two different lines fitting each other so well that it's kind of like if you were in a court of law and you had confessions and eyewitnesses and DNA evidence and a bunch of articles of evidence. Having all those different lines makes your case so much stronger, and it makes it rise to the level of the reasonable doubt that the jury's told to operate on. And the problem is with evolution deniers, we're not dealing with reasonable doubt.
I see one of our new viewers today, Sean, was asking if this is an evolution channel. And Sean, just to let you know, we actually talk about a lot of things here because I open up the panel for anybody to join. As long as they're respectful, they can talk about anything that they want. It's a community channel, so I don't even consider it to be my channel. I do run the channel technically, but it's really open format because I'm trying to bring people together who have different ideas so that we can push back on each other's ideas respectfully and hopefully find some element of truth in it all. So I'm glad to see you stop by. Welcome. It's nice to have you here.
Today I'm playing the role of the evil evolutionist science teacher brainwasher that's trying to make your middle school student think he's a monkey.
There have been a lot of innuendos to sex, gratuitous sex even. So I don't know what's going on. As I always say,
but you know what? I am in favor of educating kids and to a much greater extent adolescents about sex. And I think the reason we should is so that they can communicate about it if somebody is violating their consent. If somebody is abusing them, they have the language to express it. And having the language to express it significantly increases the likelihood that it will be expressed and an adult will be able to intervene. Like, for instance, my niece, she doesn't refer to her genitals as her vagina. She refers to it as her cookie. And I always thought that was kind of cute. But then I thought, like, what if she said somebody was eating her cookie and like she meant something other than that? Like, I think that could be a way that a predator could take advantage of a child, is by manipulating their limited knowledge of language on sex.
Well, you're absolutely right, brother. And there's another really important issue here in this is that when people try to present sex as something that needs to be shamed or is shameful, then what happens is when a person is violated, especially a child, but this can happen to an adult as well. But if you're in that mindset that sex is dirty and sex is shameful, you should be ashamed of your body and your genitals and things like that, then somebody violates a child. Well, that child, that victim, can feel like they should feel shame for what happened, that they share some sense of guilt and shame for it, which is really bad, because that just adds to the emotional trauma of a situation that's already terrible. So we're really doing people, especially young people, a disservice by speaking about sex in those ways. Now, we don't necessarily need to like glorify sex to kids. You know, I don't think we need to over sexualize, so to speak, children, but we need to have honest conversations with children as young of an age as we think that they're mature enough to handle that type of a conversation, because they need to be aware of the dangers of predators. They need to be aware of the dangers of promiscuity. If they're going to be, playing hide the sausage, they have to understand that there are consequences. There's STDs and possible pregnancies and things that can happen from that. And also having conversations about the emotional attachments that people get, right? So they have a much healthier understanding of the whole process. And then when they grow up, if they're taught that consensual adults should be able to do whatever the fuck consensual adults want to do and not be judged or shamed for it, then they're in a much healthier environment for themselves as well as for their community that they're in.
Yep, totally agreed.
Well, that is our last slide. Did you want to say
Can you put Sean's question up on the screen?
Oh, let me find. I'm sorry, I was preaching, and let me see where I was not paying attention to. Here we are.
No, not that one.
Wait a minute. What am I putting up here?
He asked,
first male and female.
Yeah.
Sean, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to put that comment up. I don't know what I was putting up before I started reading. Sean, I'm very sorry to. I am sorry to hear about that, but I can tell that you're a much stronger person and you've overcome something that's really tragic and terrible. And I have a lot of respect for that. There's a video that I did. I would really appreciate if you would take time at some point to look into it. It's on my channel. It's called Courage Without Fear. And if you're willing to share any of your story about that incident or anything else in the comment section, I think it's really, really useful. A lot of people, in fact, I think Scott, I know he left a comment in there, just a person who I see in the chat. I don't know if Dark Light left a comment in there yet. He said he saw it, but I've had people who have reached out to me on different social media platforms and say that they watched that video, Courage Without Fear, and it has helped them overcome their own trauma, to give them strength to overcome some things that they're carrying around, a lot of pain and stuff like that. So your story can be inspirational to other people. And so please do consider taking the time to watch that video. It's only like a 20-minute video. It's called Courage Without Fear. And it's probably, in my opinion, the most important thing I'll ever do on YouTube, to be honest with you. I really do think that's probably like I said, one of the most important things I'll ever do with this channel. Okay, so go ahead and address this question here. Is this the right one? I hope this time.
Yep, and this is what we can close the presentation out with, and then transition into the open panel. The evolution of sex is fascinating. Okay, like we could easily do a whole presentation about that, but so I'll try and give you the Cliff Notes version. Sex goes all the way back to unicellular organisms, bacteria, protists, and some eukaryotes. They are capable of creating variation in their populations through a very kind of basal sex-like activity called horizontal gene transfer. They literally transfer chromatin from one organism to the other, and that creates variation. So that's where sex starts to evolve. It starts with horizontal gene transfer. And then sex has evolved into a kaleidoscope of other modalities in the modern array of species, as well as the pattern that branches back to the more basal array of species. So, as far as the first males and females meet in the ocean? Yes, by the time life is developing in the ocean, a lot of it is sexual life, and it's binary sexual life. There's a male and there's a female. There's also asexual life. There's organisms that are budding, they're reproducing without sexual contact between two individuals of different gender. And the way, or sex rather, gender social. The way this works is that two different forms are adapting to a specific function. One's adapting to create a gamete that's rich in chromatin, it's rich in protein, it's rich in zinc, it's rich in all the components you need to get a life started. And another is designed to develop a gamete that's small and modal and has and is able to make a ton of them so that one of them reaches the other gamete. And so that's kind of the basis of sex evolution. That I can go a lot more into it, like how amphibians adapted by being able to lay their eggs in water and letting the males come up, and the way the protrusion adapted through that process, and how the amniotic fluid adapted to allow for organisms that were spending more time on land to still be capable of successful reproduction, because you need a 100% humidity environment in order to fertilize an ovum. And as far as the eyes have evolved a bunch of different times. But yes, eyes did begin evolving in water species. There's a couple of them, like mollusks. There's a couple mollusk species that have eyes. There's cnidarians that have eyes. There's planarians that have eyes, and those are all primarily ocean species. And then different kinds of eyes evolved among the land species. And what the basic trend of eye evolution is it starts with photosensitive cells, and photosensitive cells that formed different shapes. Eventually, they form a cup-like shape, and they just get through their geometric transformations. They get better at doing different varieties of sensory perception, accumulation of sensory data. So they go from just being able to detect light to being able to detect light and shapes and shadows to what we have now, this fully evolved suite of millions of photosensitive receptor cells that get light, color, shapes, texture, all kinds of visual information.
I'm taking a couple of questions here. I think Sean says it's too late for him to join the live panel, but he asked a couple questions in the chat here. He had a question about crocodiles. I'll post it here.
Yeah, I came on and talked to the Proverbs guys. I really like them. The fact that they're Kent Hovind fans, I want to save them. I want to save them from Kent Hovind. They're calling him Dr. Kent Hovind. He's not a doctor, you guys. I'm sorry. The only thing the man is a Christian pastor who is guilty of embellishing to the point of lying.
And he asked about crocodiles here.
Crocodiles.
Why hasn't a crocodile evolved?
So this is interesting. Okay, there's a thing called the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. And what we've figured out is that basically every species is evolving, but some species evolve much more slowly. And we can characterize this mathematically using allele distributions, using a mathematical formula that was developed by two gentlemen named Hardy and Weinberg. And their equilibrium is based on a hypothetical a species that isn't evolving, and it's actually an impossible species. It can't exist. And this is part of how we know that all species are evolving, because for a species to not be evolving at all, it has to be at an infinite size or near infinite size. It has to be experiencing zero mutations. It has to be experiencing zero natural selection. It has to have completely random mating, and it has to not migrate at all. And there are some species that get very close to that. There are species that, like humans, are very close to that. We have a near infinite size. There's not much, there's not many places left for us to migrate to. There's not a lot of mutations that are being acted on by natural selection as much anymore, because we can kind of tell natural selection to go F itself now at this point, basically, right? We've got such good medicine. Oof.
There's another comment here regarding eyeballs from Wildcard, and I'd like to remove this for a second. Let me have I'll address that question for you. Let me have Robin go ahead and introduce herself. She's joined the live chat. Oh, it looks like we got Chris in the back. I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to leave you back there. Let's let our new speakers here say something. We'll start with Robin, then we'll move over to Chris, and I'm going to pull something up about eyeball evolution for the chat here while they do that. Go ahead, guys. Have the panel, Robin.
Hey, Austin, that was awesome. That was great. I am kind of upset that you left out the whale penises, though.
Lesson learned. Next time I'll be sure to include a nice big helping of whale penises like Kent always does.
I was going to tell you that the guy in chat is really close to Kent. That guy that you were talking to, he's a real good friend of Kent's. So.
Oh, I'm sorry to insult your internet pastor.
I know you weren't aware, but he is like he's somebody that came over from Proverbs God. That's how I know him too.
Yeah, personally, I don't respect Kent very much, but I will respect your feelings enough to not take any jabs at him.
All right,
I will instead focus on his arguments.
But anyway, I just thought I'd share it with you because Joseph is a really nice guy, and so yeah. And I'll let Chris say something. So.
Oh, I was just gonna say, hey everybody. I was also gonna say that something I said in the chat, which kind of tips my cards to how I approach a lot of these scientific questions, is if you want to know, if you're asking because you genuinely want to know, or because you're curious, I personally have all the time in the world. I'll talk your ear off about it. But if you're asking that question simply because you're looking at holes in the logic or the reason or whatever, then everything I say, you're going to already see it as a whole because it's not going to come to the conclusion you're looking for, right? And I kind of smelled a little of that by when he went to male and female in the ocean, and then why, about eyes evolving and all that stuff. And then when he followed up with the crocodile thing, it's like I've heard those types of questions a billion times, and I've heard them from bad faith actors, right? So again, I'm tipping my hand a little bit to say that I'm kind of losing patience for really trying to have intellectual debates with people who are not trying to have intellectual debates or asking questions. Because if you're asking a question and you're not really interested in the answer, then you're wasting your time and mine, right? So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, you know what? And sometimes it feels like it can almost be damaging. Like I've debated Kent Hovind a couple times, and I've asked myself when I've been prepping for these debates, do I want to make these arguments to him? Because maybe I'm just giving him the raw materials with which to craft further mindfuckery. Like he's not learning anything from it. He's just going to use this to refine his spiel to better mindfuck the next clueless rube who doesn't know why the shit he's saying is wrong.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, for example, like even with the crocodile thing, I feel like, I'm not word policing here, but had they said it doesn't seem like crocodiles or alligators have evolved, have they? Like that to me feels like a more open-ended question is really looking for information versus why haven't they? And that feels more confrontational.
Well, I think we're conflating two different comments of two different people, because Wildcard is asking most of the questions like about eyes, and then Crocodiles was from Sean.
Sure. Oh, I'm
no,
sorry.
okay, I just want to make sure we're not, we're not
all right, so
attacking.
I'll use that as a blanket statement. Now, again, I don't mean to be for the individual. Maybe I'm just kind of thinking about the types of questions that I've kind of approached in the past. So I stand corrected on who asked that. But I'm just trying to point that out that sometimes the framing tells you kind of what
you're right. It's called poisoning the well. Mm-hmm. It's exactly what it is, and you're absolutely right about that. And it's a disingenuous way to make arguments, because you're not looking to have a conversation, like you said. You're looking to just basically score points or throw jabs or throw darts or whatever, and then walk away. There's I see Joseph the Lesser. I don't know, Robin. Is this one of the people that you know? Is it safe to bring him up to the? Because I've never.
Joseph, is it Joseph?
Yeah.
Like,
do you know?
If it's Joseph, yeah, he's I mean, if that's him.
Okay. Does that look perfect? Joseph, please don't do anything that's going to get my stream taken down.
No, absolutely not. It is me, Joseph. Thank you for vouching, Robin.
Okay. Yeah. Joseph's a Christian. I don't think he'll be misbehaving anyway.
Well, we won't hold that against him. Everybody's here to cover. Everybody's here.
He's a friend of mine for a long time. So.
Well, I was curious. I don't want to be
my
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Archaean, eukaryotic, amorphian, unicont, opazoan, epistocont, holozoan, philozoan, apoicozoan, metazoan, brother in the species of sapiens and the genus of Homo. How are you doing today, my friend?
Go ahead, Joseph. Yeah, have a minute to introduce yourself, Joseph. You're always welcome here. I'd hate to have to police things, because you never know what's going to happen on the internet these days. But this is an open panel. It is an open forum for people to bring different ideas and have respectful conversations. We try to keep it respectful here. Sometimes it gets heated, but for the most part, people really do maintain a cordial approach. And so I really do appreciate that.
I do my best.
I'm not really concerned about it.
Isn't being bipedal and pentadactyl just like super rad? Like, couldn't God make that?
Go ahead, Joseph. Have the floor.
Sorry.
Go ahead, introduce yourself, and what did you want to bring to the table, brother?
No, apparently this guy's got something to say. Go ahead and let him go. I yield.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big deal. I just thought it was very egotistical the way you were saying, oh, well, I've told Ken a couple of times and he just don't listen. Like why is it your job to teach him? Like, why can't you just know what you know, whether he agrees with you or not? Why is it a personal thing?
He's on the internet spreading misinformation about an important scientific matter. About the data
easy to say, but every time he does that, he provides scientific information. So argue that
he's actually being super heretical. He's claiming.
Are you a Christian?
God is a liar.
Are you a Christian?
I used to be.
Oh, I bet you're not.
I mean,
you're not a Christian right now, presently, correct?
I can't prove that I ever was a Christian, but I used to be.
I would say you probably never were. But my point is, if you're not a Christian right now, you have no basis to call anybody a heretic.
Joseph, please. Okay, this is not about Christianity.
I think it's easy to call somebody a heretic if they claim to worship a deity of truth and his demigod son, who also claimed to be a deity of truth, and he's lying about things any human being can confirm exist in the natural world.
But by the way, even if you set that aside, even if you have a purely scientific conversation about what Clint Hovind is saying, you take a biology class level 1 and you could shoot holes in his argument. So if you want to have a scientific conversation, then you have to come with science, and Clint Hovind doesn't do that. That's flat.
No, I disagree with that. But I mean, like, what specifically? Because I would disagree with you. I would say that he brings science up in whether you agree with the science or not is one thing, but to say that he never brings it up is a lie.
I think we are. I think
it's impossible to know. I think it's impossible to know. Sorry, Robin. Is it all right if I go?
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to cool things off because I don't feel like that this is probably exactly where OE wanted this conversation to go. And Joseph, I mean, like, if you want to ask maybe even some questions about this or whatever, like, he wasn't aware that you were friends with Kent, but you know, I have to. I mean, like,
Yes, ma'am. It's not about me being friends with Kent, Miss Robin. All I'm trying to suggest is that instead of just talking junk about Kent, actually show his science wrong.
Okay, let me finish my sentence.
That's what I was going to address.
Austin, I have to agree with Austin on the fact that Kent does not present accurate science. I mean, like, I don't run Kent down. I don't talk about him all the time, but he does not represent accurately the scientific community. And from what I understand, his doctorates were not exactly on the up and up. But that besides that, he's got them, and if they're good, that's fine with me. But I've watched many of his debates, and he does not accurately represent the science. And so,
well, that's an opinion. That's a subjective opinion, clearly. But he does bring up science, correct? I mean, we're looking at the science, and we come to different conclusions. That's not the same.
Argue about Kent, okay? Because that's not what OE is.
Okay, well, I didn't intend to do that. Things start off strong. We're leveling off, Miss Robin. Like, everything's cooling off. I'm willing to speak. It's okay.
I know you are a very intelligent person. I've had you debate Joe and stuff, and I know that you can carry on a good conversation. So let's drop Kent, please. Is that okay? Is that all right with you, OE?
Yeah, I appreciate you cooling things off a little bit, because I really don't want to have people attacking people. If we have, there's an argument to be made, and I respect that absolutely. And I do want people to be able to speak freely. This is not a place where we have to walk around with kid gloves, because we're all adults. But ultimately, if your intention is not to try to share some kind of information that's intellectually honest, or argue for a point that you have evidence for, and you're not willing to be honest and say, well, this is a belief as opposed to a theory or whatever, we're trying to give good information here as much as possible and not attack people. So just try to keep all that in mind.
Yes. And Joseph's not an attacker normally at all. Like, he's just defending who somebody he cares about. So,
and that's perfectly fine. And I think in Austin's defense, I have personally seen him debate Kent Hovind. So I think when Austin says, "Well, I don't think Kent's presenting the science," Austin is not just throwing darts behind Kent's back. He's actually been in a personal debate with him, and I think that's
Correct.
the most respectful thing that you could do with the person you disagree with. And at that point, I think it does give Austin a bit of a license to, to say, "Hey, this guy is full of shit," or however he wants to put it, because he has confronted him face to face as a gentleman. If you watch those debates, Austin was very polite in those debates. And so I don't think that Austin, I feel like he's kind of earned a little bit of a special right for criticism, just simply because he has had that face to face personal conversation with Kent. Now, you might see it differently.
So what you're saying to me, brother, what you're saying to me is that if I was to have a debate with Austin, I would be able to sit here and shit talk all I wanted and call him anything I wanted because I've earned that right after one debate. Is that what you're saying?
I'm calling him a bad source of information. He is, and I believe he is a bad source of information, and I'm willing to state that's my opinion, but I have a lot of evidence to back it up.
That's fair. That's fair, but that's not the question I just asked.
Yeah, and I didn't say anything. People could have a right to say, no, first of all, free speech is what it is at the end of the day. But you show what kind of a human being you are if you're going to start using slang or derogatory, what this or that, or personal attacks. I think that for this example here, if Austin's criticizing his credentials or criticizing his knowledge on a particular topic that Austin's very knowledgeable about, yeah, Austin has the right and authority, frankly, to say that, in my opinion. Now, if Austin were to say, well, Kent Hovind's a wife beater and touches kids or something like that, that would be excessive. That would be inappropriate, right? I can see that, but that's not what's happening here. He's simply addressing Kent as a self-professed scientist and biology expert and evolution expert. And I've heard Kent say this himself, that he knows a lot about this topic and he loves.
Okay, well, I understand that, brother, but he does in fact have a doctorate in education and a doctorate in divinity, and he taught for 15 years. So that means nothing. or he doesn't, or he doesn't come to the same conclusions that you come to.
Exactly what I'm talking
could-
about. Because the only thing he taught was Christian preaching. He does not know algebra. He does not know math. He does not know science.
That's a lie.
He did
That's a
not
lie.
teach that subject.
I've watched him.
And
I've watched him teach. I've watched him teach children trigonometry in 10 minutes. That is a lie, brother.
No, brother.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is.
I asked him a basic algebra question, and he couldn't even read the formula.
Not answering your question is not the same as not being able to answer your question.
Squared square.
Okay. At this point, I agree with Robin. I'm ready to move on from Kent. I didn't come in here to defend Kent. I really didn't.
That's fair. I wouldn't defend him because he is a bad source of information.
Well, I would. I just didn't come here to do it.
And even from if I were to go back to being a believer, I would still have problems with him on account.
Well, we've already established you can't go back to being a believer. You never were.
Sure.
Well, that's the no true Scotsman fallacy.
It's not really. I'm not saying that you have to do X, Y, and Z to be a Christian. So it's not. I'm saying that I agree with what he already said. If you've turned away, you probably never were to begin with. I just agreed.
Kent purports himself to be an expert on physics, cosmology, ontogeny,
Back to
phylogeny.
Kent. Back to Kent. Really?
Well, no, let me,
This is the point that I want to close on, is that he pretends to be an expert on volcanology, geology, chemistry, population statistics, and he can't answer basic
If I was to ask you, how do we fuse past iron? If I was to ask you, how do we fuse past iron? You'll say it's in the stars.
I swear I'm almost done. He can't answer basic questions about those subjects in live debates where they're relevant. And he has a pattern of saying, "Oh, I'll get back to you on that, brother." And then he never gets back to you. He never talks. And people have documented that, and they bring up the things he said. "I'll get back to you on that." And they've asked, "Have you had time to research that?" And he says, "No," every time.
Okay.
It's a strong demonstration of bad faith, of entering a discussion or negotiation with having no intention of being reached by the facts.
Okay.
And we can,
can we move on past?
Yeah, let me move on to something else. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, let me
do you object on to evolution on the grounds that you think humans are a special organism made in the image of God, that they're the only animal with a rational soul, and that like puts them in some category that's beyond being achieved by standard mechanisms of mutation and natural selection and macroevolution over millions of years?
Yes, I guess flatly, just if you need a one-word answer, yes, I disagree with that position. I disagree with the position that there is a last unknown universal ancestor, and we call it Luca, and it gave rise to everything, eukaryotes, prokaryotes, everything. Because, like, wouldn't that defy the law of monophyly? I mean, you're trying to tell me that evolution doesn't say this will happen and this will happen, but as you explain it to me, you absolutely say that those things happen. So you explain it to me without bringing in my beliefs. You just defend your position without bringing in my beliefs as a straw man.
Everything in the category of living organisms is related by being alive, no matter how much it evolves.
Exactly. And every living thing has DNA. So how do you extrapolate from that your personal story?
Genetics, the fossil record, embryology.
No. I'm sorry. My question is the fact that every living thing has DNA doesn't in itself necessarily mean that everything is related. It just means we all have DNA. Most living things breathe oxygen too. That doesn't.
It depends on how you're philosophically defining related, but it's technically related even under a theistic evolution view where God made everything. It's related by being created by a common creator.
Okay, I guess my question is the taxonomic chart. Is that descriptive or prescriptive?
I think everything about taxonomy that's used by science is prescript or descriptive rather. That's part
Okay,
of,
so it doesn't matter. Homology and all these things are not evidence of evolution. Thank you for admitting that.
no, that's not what I'm admitting at all. I'm
Well, that's what you
explaining
just said.
that they're descriptive because scientists are just using them to communicate. In fact, that's why Linnaeus invented taxonomy, right? Do you know the history of Linnaeus inventing
You mean
taxonomy?
Carolus Linnaeus, the theist? That who
Yeah,
you're talking
yeah,
about?
dude. Yeah, he was a creationist, right? Like he
Yeah, did
thought
he stop believing in God when he created the taxonomy
no,
chart?
no, he didn't. But he
All right, so why are you using it to prove God doesn't exist?
realized that humans are apes, that humans belong in the Panads, and he couldn't find anyone who could tell him otherwise for his whole life, and he still accepted God. So if Carolus Linnaeus can accept that humans are apes and still accept the existence of God, why couldn't any theist today?
Well, I don't know that he accepted that humans are apes. That's what you said. I would have to read his writings on that. I mean, a chart with hold on. Let me finish my sentence, please.
It was
A chart with
very
similarities doesn't mean a
It
chart with
was-
similarities does. Go
It
ahead.
was
Go ahead.
very
Calm down. Let's
clear.
bring it down.
He had an open door policy at his university, what qualified for a university for a naturalist at that time, for anyone to come in and lay out a reason for him for why humans shouldn't be thrown in with the Panads without breaking down the very taxonomy that was the only categorization system that made sense ever. Like other systems were putting humans with rocks. And
Okay, but do we change this? Do we change this? Don't we change animals classification in this chart based on other elements? Like don't a couple of years go by and we say, oh, this bobcat over here has a certain type of ear. We're going to put that in the bear family.
Joseph, I'm going to ask you to bring the tone down just a little bit, okay? Like this is so aggressive, and it's just not necessary because it's not making any conversation worth listening to.
Well, I apologize for the aggressiveness, but I'm trying to lay out a point here. He's already explained. Hold on. He's already explained that this is.
First of all, you're yelling.
I'm on a cell phone. I'm sorry about that. I'll put it further away from my mouth. I don't know what to say, Miss Robin.
I know, and I appreciate it, but I know you're wound up, and I understand because I had, but like let's just calm down just a little bit. You know, Austin is a good friend too, and he's works hard, and he's here to present this biology to other people too. And so let's there may be some people who got some questions for him in chat. Can
I ask Joseph a question to kind of change the subject and move the conversation along?
Yeah,
absolutely, because I'm not taking this personally. Everybody that has a problem with Kent seems to be personal. I'm not. I'm fine.
Yeah, you seem really passionate, and you seem intelligent enough to at least put together some coherent sentences on the subject. So, let me ask you this philosophical question, this little quandary. Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's even possible for evidence that exists out in the world that humans can go out and can confirm it exists, for it to be in conflict with your interpretation of your religious scripture? Or is everything that seems to be something that's in conflict with your religious scripture, people are misinterpreting it somehow, or it's a conspiracy to demote God and promote a naturalistic, materialistic worldview? Is it
okay? Well, I mean, that's
the gist of what I'm asking you. Is it possible for evidence to be in conflict with your scripture? And if evidence is in conflict with your scripture, do you go with evidence or do you stick to the interpretation of the scripture?
Well, I think you would have to be more specific instead of vague, because I do admit that there are things that can I answer the question, brother?
Yeah,
I do admit that there are things that I don't know, but I also understand that if I see something that seems to be a contradiction and both things I know are absolutely true, then that seems the error lies in me. It doesn't necessarily lie in what I'm looking at. So I guess you would have to be more specific. I mean, like a general, I could answer you right now, generally and vague, that you would hate. And it'd be like, well, with God, all things are possible. But you wouldn't accept that answer because it's too vague. And so in the same spirit, I don't accept your question because it's too vague. What exactly are you talking about that I would not look at
All right.
as evidence?
I can ask that. I can specify. How old do you think the planet is?
I don't know. I know it's at least 45 years old.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we would call a young earther. That's an example, brother. Do you think it's possible that evidence in the world can even show that, the earth is very ancient and maybe even Noah's flood didn't actually happen?
Well, half. I believe that there is some data out there that you guys could use to suggest that the earth is much older than 6,000 years. But the second part, I don't quite agree with.
Okay, so what do you think the data would look like if it was many millions or billions of years old?
Well, I think it would look like everything you present. Yeah, red shift, right? You would say, "Oh, we know by light years it is billions, and we just know it." And you would use other things like the Grand Canyon or erosion marks or the layers. I mean, you would use anything. So I don't know. Again, you need to be specific about the question you're asking me.
Yeah, all that stuff, the consilience of it, the weight of evidence. It indicates.
Well, I mean, that's only from your side. That's the shotgun approach, brother, and that's a fallacy.
It indicates one thing, and a really stilted kind of silly interpretation of scripture indicates another.
No, sir. The data is the data. Your interpretation of the data and my interpretation of the data may differ, but that doesn't mean the data is in question. Does that make sense to you? Philosophically?
Yeah, no, I agree. This was something that I said, that we know the data fits evolution. We know that it does.
No, you don't know that. You assume that. You assume like radiometric dating. You assume the rates are the same. You assume there's no contamination. I disagree.
Oh my goodness. You're saying that creationism is valid because it's a possible hypothesis, and here's this data that supports it. And I'm saying the same thing is true about evolution.
No, what I'm saying is I know that we are looking at the same set of data and coming to different conclusions. I'm not saying you are correct in your assumption of the data. Subtle difference, brother.
But can I just make a quick point?
Do you feel comfortable? Oh, Chris, I'm going to have you go too. Joseph, do you feel comfortable taking a question from the chat? Because I don't want you to feel like you're being targeted. You're on the hot seat.
No, I'm perfectly fine. Miss Robin knows I'm perfectly fine. It's okay. Go ahead.
One of the people from the chat, Scott, and then I'm going to let Chris, Bionic Chris, also ask a question too. But while I see this here, Scott asked a question for Joseph specifically. I'll put up on the screen here. He says, question for Joseph. If the universe was created recently but looks billions of years old, with light already in transit, tree rings, distant starlight, why would it be created with that built-in history?
Because I think that it's a necessity, right? Like if we take that same question and apply it to Adam, do we think God created an infant in the garden who had to fend for himself? No, he was 1 second old, but he was in the body of a 30-year-old with age, maturity. See, God doesn't create things. He creates systems. So the whole solar system, the redshift, everything is going to look old. How many times does he say he stretched out the heavens? We're going to see a redshift. That doesn't mean that redshift took billions of years to happen. Same way as Adam is 30, 40, 50, you name it, right? He's a mature adult able to take care and fend for himself. He wasn't an infant. He wasn't a sperm. He wasn't 1 second old, literally. Right?
So
there's nuance to this.
Can I steal man?
So what?
Hold on. Let me see if I can. Just want to make sure I'm following you, brother. So I want to steel man what you said, just for the audience's sake. And if I get it wrong, feel free to correct me, okay, Joseph? So what I'm hearing you say is that God created things to look or appear billions of years old out of necessity.
No, sir. He created them to function out of necessity. I don't think the how old they looked was on his mind, right?
Okay.
But Adam had to be old enough to procreate and have babies with Eve. You don't do that with 6 months old. God didn't create 2 6-month-olds and put them in the garden.
Well, that's fair enough.
That's what I'm
we
saying.
don't have, but we don't have a timeline in the book of Genesis regarding when Adam was and Eve were ejected from the garden, right? So he could have technically created a baby Adam and a baby Eve. They could have grown up in the Garden of Eden, and then at a particular point when they were adults, they could have. Yeah,
So what's your evidence for that? What's your evidence that 2 toddlers survived in the Garden of Eden without no parental supervision, nobody to feed them, nobody to train them? What's your evidence for that? I mean, you're right. Anybody can say it, but what's your evidence for it?
Oh no, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying that it doesn't give us a timeline or an age. I mean, there could have been hypothetically a number of things. God could have just brought them the food, right? Like, or fed them intravenously, or just, let them grow.
Well, I mean, in a world of possibilities,
he can just make.
I agree.
He can just make the.
In fact, I agree with you. In a world of possibilities, that's a fact, because he fed Jeremiah with the ravens. He done a number of those things later in Scripture. So you're right. He could have, but he didn't write about it. So this is just us adding to the story. And I won't do that.
Adding to the story to deny evolution?
Well, I mean, over 20 times in the first 7 chapters, it says after their kind. So there's no evolution in there. I mean, you hate it. And I'm going to repeat something Ken says that you hate, but dogs produce dogs. It is what it is.
You could argue everything is after its kind by that. Everything that's alive.
No, you can't. You can't as an evolutionist. You can't.
Yes, you can.
You can't as an evolutionist. Do you think that eukaryote gave rise to?
There's a whole field of science based on kinds. It's called taxonomy, and in it, there's
okay. Let me ask you this.
Hey, Joseph,
be so unkind about the kinds.
Stop, y'all. Like, let each other finish your sentences, okay? Because nobody can understand what either one of you are saying when you're talking over each other.
And Chris,
okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, Miss Robin. Let me ask a simple question to you guys. You guys hate on you guys hate on Kit Hovind. You guys hate on Kit Hovind. You don't think he's got a doctorate. Let me ask you this question. What do you think about Dr. James Tour, who is saying the same thing I'm saying? Is he a clown? Is he a fake? Does he have mail-in degree?
Remove you from this panel if you don't.
What am I doing, Miss Robin? What am I doing so wrong?
He's passionately defending his position. He's passionately defending his position. I know,
but it's not going well with
okay, no offense, Miss Robin, but you sound like my wife hitting me under the table when you don't like what I'm saying. That don't mean I'm wrong. It just means you don't like it. I'm sorry.
That's what women are for.
That's so true, actually. Women, and there's a good reason for them, brother. I've been married for 30 plus years, or with my wife, and behind every man there's a better woman. So Robin is actually
hey, real quick, brother. Congratulations. 30 years is a long time in today's age. Seriously, congratulations.
No, it is, and you're right. I appreciate the kind words, brother. And it's one of the things that really bothers me as an agnostic. Even I can see that the degradation of the family is a real problem in society, in my opinion. So we probably have some common ground there. But what Robin's getting to, and I agree with her 100%, when everyone's talking over each other, nobody in the audience can hear what's actually being said. And so you're providing no value to anybody, not the person you're talking to, and not the people trying to listen to you guys out of respect, because they can't hear what's going on. So let's try to be more mindful of the fact that, if somebody's talking and you start talking at the same time, you've just completely muted the whole conversation. So you're actively participating in shutting the conversation down. And I do recognize the passion. And I also do think you're both being very respectful, to be honest with you. I think you guys are both trying to be very respectful, but it's a passionate conversation. Chris also needs to get involved in this conversation. He's been very patient and respectful. So Chris has a chance to go ahead and ask a question or participate here. Go ahead, Chris.
All right. I'm just going to say, first I want to make an interesting observation. 2 seconds ago, or about a minute ago, Joseph was able to put you on your back feet, asking you for evidence that Adam was a toddler in the Garden of Eden. And then you went and in your well-mannered way try to maybe come up with some theories or whatever. Meanwhile, there's no evidence that there was ever an Adam or ever an Eden to begin with. And I think that's a strategic thing. Why can we not have a conversation about the scientific absence of any evidence?
Chris,
that existed. You know what I mean? Like it's such an absurd premise, and yet now we're debating the number of angels on the head of a
This
pin.
is the essence of apocryphal scripture, is that you can interpret reality in such a way that it fits the scripture, but some people try to fit reality to the scripture instead of fitting the scripture to reality, and
Right.
that's
Can I ask a
what I
question?
think is the issue.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, brother, what's the difference between me believing Adam and Eve were not toddlers and you believing without evidence, without videotape, without microscopic, without any data at all, you believe that a male and a female with different reproductive organs popped up de novo and were close enough to each other that affected all the populations around them? I mean, you have a faith too, but you only want to point out mine.
So are you creating an equivalency? Are you criticizing my faith but saying yours is
No,
valid?
I'm asking you. Why can't I turn around your question to
And
you
what I'm
and it
asking
have
you
the
is,
same effect?
why can you weaponize faith when it's convenient? But so is faith a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I mean, to start off, I didn't mean to weaponize faith
No, but that's
at
what
all.
you're doing. I'm asking you because right now you just do faith.
How though? How? By telling you what I believe and confronting what you believe? How am I weaponizing it?
Because what I'm saying is you threw faith back on my lap to give me the burden of proof to defend this thing you call
Well,
faith.
I mean, you do have faith.
But so are you drawing an equivalency between the two?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is, what I'm drawing out is your hypocrisy. You can't look at me like I'm an. Hold on, let me answer your question. You can't look at me like I'm an idiot for having faith when I push you to the bare bones, and that's all you have. Also, is faith. You can't do that. That's hypocritical.
No, this really what it boils down to is even if you say that our science doesn't add up, call it what you will, an incomplete, as it's a cliche thing to say, a question without answers is better than an answer without questions. So what I'm saying to you is you keep throwing back this like, well, if I have faith, you have faith. So is faith a good thing or a bad thing?
Faith is a great thing, but to answer your question, I don't keep going back to that. I just point out, don't look at my faith like it's a bad thing while you're ignoring your own faith as if you don't have any. Like spell my name right, brother. Spell my name right. Exactly say what I'm saying to you. Don't maneuver around it.
It's not maneuvering. What the difference is that the answers we come up with have a practicality and a purpose, and we accomplish things with.
No, it doesn't. No, only to you. To you, you think you have a purpose and a practicality, even though you would agree that evolution is unguided and random. There is no purpose. You would agree to that, but now you want to sit here and tell me that you have a purpose.
Oh, wait. Give me a second, Joe. I want you to hear something. Do you go to the doctor and use medicine?
Why do you keep making this about me? Answer my questions to you. How is it that you can't prove anything you believe, but you don't think it's take it on faith?
But do you see
that's the question?
Because the thing is, your accusation of faith is trying to draw an equivalency to something that there's no equivalency because it's false.
Okay, what's my definition of faith?
Please do not cut me off. What I'm trying to
say. Okay, well, don't put words in my mouth.
I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm trying to represent your argument back to me. What you're saying is that you're throwing all these kind of criticisms of science, how this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, but there's nothing, not a zero shred of evidence that there was ever an Eden or an Adam. So now you're trying to basically say that your whole argument, your attempt to draw an equivalency between evolution and creation has the foundational emptiness of anything even resembling a pattern.
No, it doesn't. What's your evidence of this primordial soup that was hit by lightning? What's your evidence of that?
Even imperfect evidence is better.
No, I'm asking you, what is your evidence of that? Do you have some?
What evidence do you have that Adam had an immune system?
Are you kidding me? He was a human like we are. Do you have an immune system? What kind of question? What evidence do you have of the primordial pond that got hit by lightning? Is my question.
What do you know about biochemistry?
But even simple.
No. Don't move the goalposts. What is your evidence of the primordial soup that got hit by lightning? What is your evidence other than theory?
Okay. I'm gonna abandon this because you're not interested in actually exploring the question. Why did Adam?
Brother, I am
why did
interested in
Adam-
exploring the
Yes,
question.
no.
I'm not interested in exploring the question why you're being a hypocrite about it. That's the contention that I have.
Stones, my guy, because at the end of the day, if I ask you why did Adam have an immune system, you don't have an answer.
No, I do have an answer. Do you want to hear it?
Did God make
It's because he was
viruses in the
created
Garden
in
of
the
Eden?
image of God. And no, it's because he was created in the image of God, and he was preloaded with the genetic information that the rest of humanity would need. That's my answer. So I do have an answer. What is
So
your
did-
answer
so
for
my
the
question-
faith
wait a
of the
second, wait a second.
prebiotic pond that got hit by lightning? What's your answer?
So before we get there, I'm trying to walk you through this. So you're basically saying that Adam had an immune system that he never needed to use.
Why would he not have an immune system if God already had foreknowledge that the fall was
Why
going to
would-
happen?
Okay, so
See, you guys don't understand the whole story. You got your blinders on.
but you're building an entire mythology and then trying to call it scientific.
Right, and it's in conflict with what we can observe, which is that the
Build this.
immune
Hold on,
system.
slow down. I didn't build this. I didn't build this. I'm reiterating what's already
The
written.
immune system
I'm reiterating what's already.
contradistinction to the pathogens and viral threats that exist in an organism's environment. If those things don't exist, the immune system don't exist. Literally, memory cells die if they don't have an invasion to fight against.
Didn't I already say that God creates systems? He don't create things. So that's already been answered. But you're
Okay,
completely dodging my question to you.
I want to ask some specific and scientific questions about the creation of that system. Is God just like, what are we seeing if it's happening in front of us? Is there a floating nervous system, and then the dust inside the nervous system turns to interstitial fluid when the nervous system is complete, or does it then move on to the turning some of the dust into blood vessels, and do the blood vessels close around blood, or do they close around dust and then the dust gets like you understand? We can't answer any of these questions. They're all completely theological, up in the air. We'll never be able to answer them, most likely. And so this is really more just a thought killer. Like we're
Okay,
just
well, let me
never
ask you
gonna
this
find
then.
anything out about what actually happened, because we're accepting this scriptural explanation because it satisfies some theological position that should be irrelevant to the facts. We shouldn't even be asking what the facts mean for any doctrine, any sect, religion, or cult's scripture, right? Or their interpretation of it.
Well, let me ask you this though. Like, what was it? Say that last part again. I'm sorry. My wife come home with a whole bunch of groceries. I got distracted. Please say that last part again, brother.
So it's about whether or not we're just going to follow the data to the best of our utmost impartial and honest, imperfect fish, monkey, ape brains, frog, monkey, ape brain, human, trying to do the best it does with tools that it has: philosophy, scientific method, search engines, technologies and innovations, schools and universities, and all the systems that exist that allow us to get a more in-depth answer than just this really low resolution scriptural answer that we're being offered. Excuse me.
Right, but don't you feel like that's baked in the cake? I mean, you spent how many years in school? 12, 15, 20, maybe? And you got a pat on the back and a blue ribbon for every time you said whatever they wanted you to say. I mean, that's more indoctrination than learning. I mean, all you're telling me is that you have all these accolades from all these institutions that patted you on the head for saying what they wanted you to say. And now you're looking at me like you got the answer, even though you can't answer any questions that I'm asking you.
I'm saying that I think what's happening is the people who are telling you you're wrong about this subject is they're looking at a larger body of facts than you, and they're doing so with a vastly superior epistemic method, one that doesn't toss out the most likely explanation possible in order to defend an interpretation of a religious scripture.
Right, but I'm not defending. Oh, I mean, I guess I am at some point. You're right, but we got to get there first. I mean, you tell me, how did life get here?
It's a fascinating question, and there's so many pieces to that puzzle. I am a fan of abiogenesis for sure, and the non-theistic kind, the kind that doesn't involve a floating nervous system and then dust turning into interstitial fluid and then blood vessels and then blood, and however you want to say it all happened. I believe
Okay, so
in
you
a
believe that
system.
even though
I
there's
believe.
zero evidence.
Let me just wax on this a minute or two, because I am kind of the guest of honor today. So I believe that a system that starts with metabolism first, that just the rhythms that create biological material are the first step, and then you have a biogeochemical distribution of elements via entropy, and energy runs through this entropic system, putting that matter into the right configuration to give rise to replicators. And those replicators have been evolving on the planet. It's a chemical cascade that's been burning for billions of years, and it's diversified through natural selection and random mutation, through variable replication and biochemistry. So it starts.
Yeah, okay, I mean, that's a pretty cool.
It starts with a pulse, just a pulse of life.
Okay. Right. So where'd that pulse come from? That's exactly the question. I mean, that was a great story, but you didn't explain once where life came from.
I think it's biorhythmic. I think that's physical.
Yeah, but I mean, you said it's abiogenesis, and I just want to hold on. I'll let you speak. Let me speak.
Go ahead. Yep,
okay.
Yep.
So I'm asking you. You said abiogenesis. I mean, what do you know that the rest of the scientific world doesn't know? Because the rest of the scientific world knows that life produces life. Non-life does not come from non-life. For you to sit back and say, well, we know all this because
a whole field of origin.
Okay, so I still can't finish. You're still ready to jump in and call me the problem.
I'm just saying that is incorrect, because there is a whole field of origin of life studies. It's not just abiogenesis.
And it's all been debunked by James Tour. That's what I'm saying. You have nothing, but you have nothing but belief. You have nothing but faith. There is.
No, Joseph, I'm going to ask you once again to calm down. Okay?
Robin, I was the one interrupted and cut off.
Down.
Tell your boys. Tell your boys. Stop telling me and tell your boys.
I'm going to ask OE to remove you from the panel.
No, I just muted him for a second. I just muted him for a second so he could let you finish your sentence. Joseph, and this goes for everybody else here. Yeah. Joseph, I'm going to unmute you here.
I was just going to say that there's not just abiogenesis, there's synthetic life studies, there's protein synthesis, there's protein folding studies, there's astrobiology, there's unnatural base pair studies, UBP studies, which is a very advanced field of biochemistry, and there's xenonucleic acid studies, which is a very similar field that's slightly different. Like, this is the
every one of those start with life,
evolutionary science, is that it has led to like 273 plus disparate fields of scientific inquiry, because it keeps answering questions that we come up with.
That was a long answer to something I didn't ask. I asked you you're appealing to this.
Right there, Joseph, you're being very, very
Robin, okay, I'm just gonna go. If I can't speak, I mean, I'm being interrupted, I'm being muted, I'm being told by you I can't do anything. What the hell?
You claimed basically that abiogenesis is a dead science. I was just pointing out that is not factual at all, that there's actually many fields related to abiogenesis.
I know, but I can't even speak to refute you because you and Robin are acting like crybabies.
I don't know what you're going to refute, because it's a blatant
You're
fact.
Not refuting it. You threw James Tour in there, and that doesn't refute
it. Because he does this for a living, and you guys just talk about it. I'm telling you very plainly, life does not come from life, and you cannot show me one explanation where it does. Not one. But you're sitting here telling me and everybody else we're wrong.
I get what you mean.
But here's the thing. At this point, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Austin is the guest, okay, Joseph? And I'm sorry, like maybe
no, Austin was the guest. This is an open panel now.
Wait a second.
But he's still the guest, and just you're being very aggressive and stuff, and like that's not.
I am sorry, Miss Robin, but every time I speak, I get cut off and told to shut up. I mean, can I represent myself?
You're not.
Can I represent myself, or do I got to let these guys represent me?
If I hear something that I believe to be incorrect and that I can counter with facts and data, I'm going to speak up about it. And
well, I am the exact same way. And so when I hear you telling people that abiogenesis is proven when it has not been proven, that's a lie. And I'm going to say something about it.
This is Objective Ethics channel, and he does not ever have panels that act like that are like this. Okay. So
I don't care. I'm not trying to set any records. I'm just trying to say, don't tell me abiogenesis proves that life.
People
see,
get very
every time. Every
people
time.
get very passionate about this subject.
Here's the interesting thing. I don't mean to cut you guys off. Today we're talking about abiogenesis. 50 years ago, we were talking about the roots of evolution. 100 years or maybe 200 years before that, we were talking about how pathology works. It just seems like the more today, this is the hot topic. Whenever there's kind of a blind spot, there's this kind of theological, or you see the default answer must be scripture. 500 years ago, before we had telescopes, microscopes, before we understand germ theory, we assumed that death and sickness came from the heavens and of righteous justice.
See that. This is more nonsense, brother, because I haven't brought up scripture. I can't even get in here to argue scientifically. I definitely haven't brought up scripture yet.
But I'm not saying you specifically. What I'm trying to say is this, is in reality, the more the science figures stuff out, the more the technology advances, the anti-science argument or the theological argument, because you could call it what you want. We know you're arguing from theology. The more the theological argument says, well, if there's a gap, it must be God of the gaps. So whether we're talking about abiogenesis, whether we're talking about
right, but when I ask you, that's what I'm saying, brother. When I ask you about abiogenesis, you're going to give me Darwin of the gaps. You're going to say we don't know yet, but we're working on it. We're figuring it out. So don't act like I'm completely different. You guys do the exact same thing, except you don't let me speak and talk about it.
But that's
he's an evolutionary biologist. He's not an abiogenesis. So that's why he's here for evolutionary biology.
It's one of the areas I've actually studied, though.
Wait a second. Here's what I'm saying,
if you're comfortable answering questions about it, then that's fine. But like that's the thing. He's a biologist. That's what he is, a biologist. And it was here. And there may be other people that have questions, Joseph.
Okay, I understand that, but he's not a Christian. Why are you treating him like he's a fucking perfect representation of the Christian argument? He's not.
I used to be a young Earth creationist.
I don't prioritize.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Either. All right, that's please just.
Okay, so the way this is going, and Joseph, as far as the muting, and I do apologize if you felt disrespected for that, because I feel like it's embarrassing for me and for you. I don't like to do it. I've never actually muted anybody before. That's the first time I've ever done it on this channel. And the only reason I did it isn't because of you getting into it with Austin and Chris. It's because you were cutting off Robin, and this is not just your fault. Because honestly, this has been something that's building up in me for a long time. I just watched Robin do a stream on her own channel, and I'm not going to name names, but it was a channel about women being hurt by religion, and there was 4 or 5 guys on that channel. They were having an argument, and they were getting into it, and Robin kept trying to interject and say, "Hey guys, I need you gentlemen to calm down a little bit." On her own fucking channel, the only woman speaking about women being hurt in religion, and not one of those fucking guys. And a lot of them are my friends, and I really care about these gentlemen, but they were acting like animals. Do not fucking overtalk Robin. I'm really tired of seeing the men do that. And it's not just Robin. They treat other women this way. And I do have a soft spot for women and children. And so I don't want to see that happening. If Robin is trying to calm things down, I really appreciate that she's trying to present a good product, which is what this ultimately is. It's an opportunity for us to share information. We're not here making money off of this. It's not that kind of product. It's a nonprofit effort. All of us are trying to make the world a better place, right? And I respect you, Joseph. I think that's what you're trying to do, is make the world a better place, brother. Austin is trying to make the world a better place, and so is Chris. And Robin is saying, hey, look, this is dysfunctional right now. And because you guys are talking over her, you specifically in that instance, I muted you. And that's, like I said, I don't want to ever have to do that again, because I don't like to do that. I like, grown-ups to be able to basically police themselves. But I'm getting a short fuse when it comes. I'm getting a short fuse when it comes to people talking over Robin. You guys cut each other off. You cut me off. I don't like it. I don't want to see it, but I let a lot of that go. I want you guys to ultimately police yourselves, but do not overtalk Robin. All right. Now I've said what I had to say. Go ahead, brother.
Understood. That's the law you lay down on this channel. Understand, respect. Miss Robin, I apologize. Even though you know where I'm coming from, you know I don't hate you, you know what it is. I understand everything.
Oh no.
I appreciate the passion. I appreciate the passion. I think that you guys actually are doing a good job of keeping yourselves under control for the most part, but it's passionate. And I know there's a lag, like the brothers on the phone. I know personally that when I'm on a phone versus on my PC or my laptop, whatever, I don't. So there's a silence, a brief pause. I think someone's done talking, and I start talking. So there's an understandable reason why all this is happening. I just ask, please, let's just try to be a little bit more cordial. And again, think about the fact that if you really care about what you're talking about and you really believe that you're sharing truth, that you're trying to get truth out into the internet, right? Then think about how effective it is when nobody can hear what you're saying because you guys are talking over each other. But I do respect the passion, and I do respect the fact that you guys are referring to each other as brother and sister, because as everybody who watches my channel has heard me say 1,000 times, I don't have friends or enemies. I only have brothers and sisters. I have brothers and sisters who I really love to spend time with. I have brothers and sisters that I may have fundamental disagreements with. And I have brothers and sisters that I can't stand to be around and I wish I could disown, but I can't, because you can't choose your family. So Joseph, you're my brother. Austin's my brother. Robin's my sister. Chris is my brother, so on and so forth. So I appreciate that you guys are referring to each other that way. Even in a heated argument, that tells me that you guys do have a bit of respect for each other as human beings. And I think that's a really important thing that the audience is seeing just by you guys referring to each other as brother. Even though you're pissed off, that's perfectly fine. We can get pissed off about things. That's not necessarily a problem. So you guys are actually doing a pretty good job. Just stop over talking each other, please.
You know what I say. Everyone is in the genus of Homo and the species of sapien is my bilaterian, nephrozoan, deuterostomic, chordat, olfactorin, craniate, osteichthyon, vertebrate, pentadactyl, bipedal, hominoid, hominid, hominin, brother or sister, or they, them, in the species of sapien in the genus of Homo. Right. We are all related through common ancestry.
And the only point I'm making is less about specifics, about argument versus argument or evidence versus evidence per se. And that's why I'm not taking the debate into the primordial soup thing. It's just simply that the pattern always emerges, that every couple of years or every couple of decades or generations, whatever you will, that whenever there's a scientific debate between the theological view of things and the scientific view of things, it's always the scientific community that has to put itself on the defensive, simply because the theological people can say, well, if you can't prove it, it must be, right? So again, before we knew what weather patterns were, I mean, no one today would say that hurricanes and tornadoes are caused by the wrath of a vengeful God, as it were, right? But 500 years ago, if there was a bad crop or there was a hurricane, we were hucking virgins into volcanoes. So there's always been that kind of tension between the kind of the divine and the mundane.
Not really. There's no tension there. That's a straw man. Theists invented the scientific method. They are responsible for everything you guys are doing to try to prove God doesn't exist. So stop with the straw man.
But they don't use the scientific method on their own theology.
No, of course they don't. Of course they don't.
They don't. They don't, though, because if they did, for example, repeatable, observable, all the go down the list of the scientific method.
All the things they invented, they don't observe all the things they invented. Stop, brother. Stop.
Listen, and the Muslims invented a lot of forms of math. That doesn't mean we say that.
Yeah, like splitting the moon and riding from heaven on a unicorn. Yeah, okay. Talk to me more about Muslims.
Oh, and algebra.
So you agree with religion now? Right? So you agree with religion now? No, you agree with the Muslims?
No, what I'm saying is that when a mathematician is doing the math, we take the math. We don't look at the identity of the mathematician. We don't look at the identity of the biologist. We look at the
until it comes to James Tour. Until it comes to James Tour, who destroys everything you're saying.
Insert name here. We don't criticize them because of their theology. We criticize them versus their science. You could agree or disagree with the science of it, but at the end of the day,
it's not about agreeing or disagreeing with the science of it, brother. I can tell you, and I can attest, and I can affirm from my own experience on this channel what you guys do. Okay, so don't tell me what it is when I already know. That's ridiculous. And especially when you're trying to say you take this on faith and you take this on faith and you take that on faith, and then you got the nerve to look at me and say, "What? You read that from the Bible? Did you read that from the Bible?" I mean, you are a hypocrite.
Dude, we went over this already. I'm not.
No,
gonna,
you ran your mouth about it a little bit, but that doesn't mean we went over it.
The reality is, I'm gonna shut up because you're not listening. But at the end of the day, all we ask is that you be intellectually honest. That's all.
Sure.
We did go
Simos?
over it because we talked about, I don't know if you were here for it, but I think you were. We talked about how you don't have to be an atheist to accept evolution. Evolution is true whether or not a God exists, whether or not a goddess exists, whether or not entire pantheons of deities exist. Evolution is true, and it's agnostic on the position of whether or not any God exists. You can justify
that's a
any
claim.
God, even
That's a claim.
irrational gods, by the
No, it's
system
not a
you're
claim.
using.
Francis
But that's a
Collins.
claim, correct?
Well,
That's just
there
your
is-
claim.
Joseph, let's go ahead and just everybody take a minute. I do know a lot of people who do profess to be theists, but both Muslims and Christians who I know personally who also believe in what they call theistic evolution. They believe that God used evolution for creation. So I mean, it's anecdotal, I understand, but I actually do know people who make that claim. Let's everybody just take a minute, take a few deep breaths, and let's let Scott and Simos, our two new guests, have something to say. Just give everybody equal opportunity to speak, and also everybody keep in mind that Joseph, apparently is the only theist on the panel right now, and I don't want him to feel like he's just completely on the hot seat because he doesn't owe anything to anybody other than we all owe each other respect. But he's not here to be attacked. You know what I mean? So let's just everybody keep that in mind. Scott, you go ahead, and you haven't had a chance to say anything yet, so I'd like you to have a chance to speak, and then Simos, I'd like you to have a chance to speak. And when Simos goes, I want everybody to remember to please subscribe to Simos's channel. We're trying to get him to 500 subs. He has a great channel, so I'm going to probably mention that a few times during this stream. Oh, something else. I'm so sorry, guys. Before you go, I meant to say this several times during this during Austin's presentation. We are supporting and promoting the Ark Encounter protest. And so I do have a link to that PayPal in the description of this video. It's a very important event for many of us. We really think that's something that is really important to fight against what we see as being misinformation. So I am promoting that actively. Chris has donated. I know there's a couple other people who've donated, so who didn't want to be mentioned, but we're starting to get some people who are starting to donate to that event. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. Literally $5 will make a difference. Anything can help. So 100% of that goes to the event itself. I don't take a cut out of any of this. I've never asked you guys for money for me personally. I don't want your money. I don't need your money, but the protest does. And so we're going to be actually doing a event. What do we call, like a promotional show specifically for that? And I'll be donating a few $100s myself. So please do, if you can, use that link. It's a PayPal link. It goes directly to the organizers, and do support that event. And with that, Scott, why don't you have the floor, brother?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and due respect to everybody, including the theist. I guess the only thing that I wanted to point out was two things. I really liked what Chris was talking about, as far as, you know, it's not about the identity of the scientist, like how he identifies or she identifies. It's mainly about the evidence. And, you know, and if you're going to accept the framework of science, then you should be open to the evidence that is consistent with the scientific method. And so, for example, you know, we have a Christian scientist who's the head of the Human Genome Project, or was, and that's Francis Collins. He's an evangelical Christian, and yet he's come to accept evolution and headed up the entire Human Genome Project, right? So it's just not true that it's a conspiracy, or, you know, it's a denial of Christianity to embrace evolution. And the other thing I wanted to point out too was that, you know, it's a good point to make that, you know, abiogenesis is incomplete, but that's fertile ground for science. That's what they love. They love incomplete stuff, just like they love anomalies. It's an opportunity to expand your knowledge even further. So we don't look at that as a bad thing. We don't look at incomplete knowledge as necessarily bad. It's just part of life. And it gives you the opportunity to maybe learn something new. And again, in science, everything is tentative. It's not like it's like a tentative conclusion, not necessarily a dogma. Even though I know that some scientists may be dogmatic, but that's scientists. The method isn't about that. The method is about peer review, having a high bar of evidence, and making sure that you graduate from hypothesis to theory, you know? So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And I guess Joseph is no longer with us, unfortunately. I wanted to ask questions, but
he actually is still in the chat, it turns out. And yeah, no, Scott, that's a really important point. And Austin had brought it up as well. And I had mentioned it. There are theistic evolutionists.
There used to be one.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is true. Simos, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everybody about your fantastic channel. Robin's already got a link put up in the chat for everybody.
That's enough. Just I'm not putting out a lot of content right now, but I intend to start sometime. I mainly do F1, or at least the next content will be F1 Formula One, reporting from the race in Miami, and that'll be Monday week. Yep, Monday week. So please, if you like that kind of thing, come and join us. There, I do have a playlist of philosophical and theological topics, which you can go and look, called The State of the Onion. And they're basically open panel discussions on a particular topic. So if you like that and you see any of the topics there you like, then they might be worth a look. Apart from that, I just really wanted to address a point that Joseph was making. Could we go back to the full screen? I feel really quite self-conscious, even though it's just my avatar. I just wanted to, he's gone. So I feel like honor bound in some ways to represent, right? But of course, I'm an atheist, so I'm probably not going to be able to represent him the way he would like, but I will represent him the way that I like. Which is simply to say that, he made some undeniable points, right? The people that, most, obviously through law mainly, Europe was Christian for many, many centuries. And during that period of time, many advances in science and many sciences bloomed out of natural philosophy. And alchemy became chemistry, and whatever. So those things are true. There's no doubt about it. There were Christians. Famous examples of the Big Bang Theory, of course, was thought of by a priest. The periodic table was thought of by a monk, Eastern Orthodox monk. So that's just true, right? And I don't think anybody on this panel would object to me saying that, because that's history, and that's what's important, I think, is to accept these points with an open mind, right? And I think it is important to understand that that we don't have to be partisan to accept what is evident. Right, and that's the main criticism I have with some of what I would call people who haven't looked into a topic deep enough to understand what the science is saying about it, and therefore will dismiss it regardless. I say, when I don't know about something, right, I say I just don't know about that. And I can go away and look at the particular relevance, or try to look into the data, try to educate myself a little further as to what the opposite side is saying. And then I can try to understand that in some degree. And when I've looked into things like creationism or intelligent design, I found it to be lacking in any kind of rigorous definitional, substance, effectively. So I just don't find that as a credible view, personally. When I've looked into, and I'm not a biologist, right? As Austin will undoubtedly tell you, whenever I speak on the subject, it just sounds like bullshit.
Of course not. You're a grand poobah of the YouTube cult of evil evolutionists out to brainwash people with your fancy book learning talking words things. Where you
Yeah, maybe, but like I don't think that. No, I think that I literally will go to look into the opposite side of my position, or what I perceive to be my position. But I'm not a biologist, but I would still affirm through just scientific consensus alone that it's more likely evolution is true than not. Right, but I
Well,
don't know. I don't know the proofs of it.
Demos,
I've never seen, like, a dinosaur bone fossilize. So
well,
what do I know?
another point I wanted to bring out kind of goes along with what you just said a little earlier, is that science is metaphysically neutral, right? I mean, it may use certain metaphysical hypotheses as shaping principles, but
Yep.
really, in the philosophy of science, I mean, we have underdetermination, which is like
Good point.
something that can fit the data. We all work with the same data, yet we can all have different interpretations of what it means, metaphysically or ontologically, right? So there's room for that. That's exactly why you have Christians that believe in evolution, and sometimes you have atheists that don't believe in evolution. Like, it's underdetermined when it comes to metaphysics. But I'm just saying, if we're all going to agree with the framework of science, if we're going to say, look, it's useful, it's progressive, it may not tell us anything about ontology, but at least it's useful and it gets us places, we learn something, we have knowledge from it. If we can at least accept that, then I think we can start having conversations about science and about what the evidence shows. And we can still keep our metaphysical worldviews intact, because they don't have anything to do with science. Science doesn't care about your metaphysics.
Gentlemen, can I jump in? I'm so sorry to interrupt, and I agree with everything everyone's saying. Robin apparently needs to leave. I want to give her a chance to say goodbye and to have a final word like I do with everybody. And Joseph, by the way, if you're still in the chat, if you do want to come in when it's time to have final words, you can have an uninterrupted final statement since you were part of the discussion. But let's let Robin have her final word and say goodbye. Tell everybody about your channel, that kind of thing. Thank you, Robin, by the way, for helping to keep cooler heads around here. Really appreciate your efforts.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm the woman, so I got to jump in and like take over everything, even if it's not my channel. I'm Robin Webster, and I put my channel, but OE will have my channel in the description too later. I am going to ask everybody to join in on our fundraiser for the Ark Encounter. I live in Kentucky, so this impacts me specifically. And so I am opposed to the Ark Encounter, the use of my state taxes for it. I'm not opposed to the Ark Encounter. I'm opposed to the use of my state taxes. Anyway, just want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Austin. That was a great presentation. I appreciate the time and effort that you put into it. And I've tried to post everybody's channel in the chat. And thank you, OE. You are one of my brothers. And thank you.
Oh, I appreciate the kind words, sister, as always. And also, I really appreciate your help with the debate. I don't know if anyone here or everyone here by chance caught the debate last night. I did some bonus content this week. I was really busy, actually, between work and doing extra streams. But I was invited to have a conversation with a Muslim gentleman, Khalid. We had, this is a two-part conversation. We did the first part on his channel. We did the second part on my channel on Wednesday. Is the West lost and dying? That was a great conversation. I really encourage you guys to check out both videos. I think the first part went better than the second part, but we had a little bit more common ground in the first part of the discussion than the second part of the discussion. But it was very respectful conversation between an agnostic and a Muslim, and I really enjoyed that conversation. We may even end up doing a part 3. And then that was Wednesday. And then Saturday, which was last night, I hosted a debate and moderated a debate for the first time between a Christian and a Catholic. And it was about whether Paul contradicts Jesus. And it was a really interesting topic. And I thought it was a really well fought debate. I can't say who I thought won because I don't want to show partiality since I modded the debate. But I'll just say that both people did a great job. There were some really strong arguments in that debate. And Robin helped me with that, organizing it and moderating it. So I really appreciate her effort. She's been a real big supporter of the channel. There was a couple things that were mentioned. I just wanted to point out, and this is not to throw stones at Joseph while he's not here to defend himself. But I do want to just point out, because some things went by that I didn't get to mention when he was here. is that when he was asked about evidence for his claim of debunking, instead of providing any of the evidence, he mentioned James Tour. That's an appeal to authority fallacy. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to show that if our arguments are fallacious, we need to refine our arguments and maybe improve them to do a better job moving forward to be more effective. It's okay to use authority as like a to help substantiate arguments, but you can't base the argument on authority itself, right? So I could say, hey, X, Y, and Z is the evidence. And like I do for objective morality, for example, I'll say, okay, here's my arguments for objective morality. And the majority of philosophers are in agreement with me, or I'm in line with the consensus of philosophy on my objective moral position. There's nothing wrong with citing the experts, but you can't just say, well, the expert said this, and so therefore that's how it has to be. You can say that, but you can't. That's not giving anything to the conversation. It's a fallacy. It's called appeal to authority. The other thing that was mentioned that I always have a problem with is when I hear people say you can't get life from non-life. My understanding of basic chemistry, and I'm not a chemist or a physicist, but my understanding of basic chemistry is there are exactly 0 organic elements on the periodic table. You can get to organic molecules, but we don't have any actually organic elements, right? So technically, all life is made from non-life. If you get down to the fundamental level of what life even is, right? When these inorganic materials or these elements combine to certain combinations, then we get to what we call organics. So you actually technically can get life from non-life. And there was a final thing. Oh, there was this here. Go ahead, Austin. I'll bring this up because you'd have probably more to say about that. Maybe I'm
we used to think that there was some kind of categorical difference between inorganic and organic materials. Like we used to think that, and you can kind of see why we might think that. Like there's no such thing as a sugar mine, right? Sugar only comes from plants doing photosynthesis. So you can see why we might think, there's a certain category of substances that are just different. But now we know all those substances are made of mostly carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur, and a couple of other trace amounts of elements, if that. And it's all technically inorganic. The inorganic-organic distinction is now only useful for like names of fields of chemistry that are specifically about the chemistry of living things.
Very good. There was another comment that was made a long time ago in the chat about eyes, that we've never seen any evidence of the evolution of an eye. And so this is going to be an abstract just pulled up. Anybody could do this search, but there are going to be links to actual sources, and there's going to be, you follow those links, you can get into actual peer-reviewed journals. If you're really being intellectually honest with yourself and legitimately interested in evidence for the evolution of an eye. And it starts out, it's very basic. The earliest forms of life on Earth were blind, responding only to chemical gradients, temperature, or touch. The first towards vision was evolution of photoreceptors, single cells capable of detecting light but not forming images, over 600 million years ago in shallow marine environments. These cells contained opsins, light-sensitive proteins that change shape when struck by photons, triggering nerve impulses and providing organisms with basic information about light and dark, which conferred survival advantages such as avoiding predators or finding food. And you can see that it goes into gradual complexity, molecular and genetic mechanisms, diversity across species, Darwin's perspective, and then there's a summary. The evolution of eyes illustrates, evolution of eyes illustrates a remarkable journey from simple light detection to complex vision, shaped by natural selection, genetic innovation, and ecological pressures. This process highlights both the power and incremental evolutionary change and the diversity of solutions life has developed to perceive the world. So there is actual evidence out there. And again, there are sources like Wikipedia, for example. If you go to a Wikipedia article, you can find the actual sources in the article itself. So while this is admittedly basically what you consider to be an abstract, you can follow the chain of evidence if you're really legitimately, intellectually, honestly interested in the answer to that question about evolution of the eye. And I think somebody was trying to join. Yeah, we have somebody else. Leo, welcome to the conversation, Leo. Since this is your first time here, my rules are please be respectful of everybody, be polite, and don't do anything that's going to get my stream taken down. And since it's your first time,
you don't have to worry about Leo.
Oh, very good. Well, Leo, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
I will vouch for Leo. He is a quality source of information on metaphysics, physics, all kinds of subjects. Good to have you, Leo.
Well, you know what they say, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but certainly better than a master of one. Yeah, I'm Leo Filius. I do content that you absolutely should not watch because it's really bad.
That puts us on the same page then, brother. Probably. Absolutely. Well, you're always welcome to come here. Thank you so much for coming by. And at this point, it's really an open panel for open discussion. So you guys go ahead and have at it.
All right, so I'm going to be antagonistic because I guess someone has to be. So here's my question, because I have a great mind to pick. I kind of want you to walk me from there's a lot of, let me gather my thoughts. There seems to be a lot of things that when we talk about specifically human evolution, there's some things that I've asked the question, I've never gotten a satisfactory response to. How is it that we're able to do things like speak and create representative art and all those things? Because I can't think of the conditions in which those things would be beneficial, where there would be, like, I guess, selection pressure to kind of spur things like, and I'm sure there's other examples that
For
seem
sure.
more, I'm sorry?
For sure.
Yeah, like
Selection
they
pressure.
seem a little more esoteric a little bit, and yet if selection pressure and mutations select for those things, like how do you select for representative art, or how do you represent for
It selects for experimental behavior.
Right.
And an experimental behavior that reduces stress or helps somebody work through psychological issues, or just create something that they admire that brings them joy, that will also reduce stress and cortisol and adrenaline and all those things that age you early, like the kind of things that start to raise up in me when a Kent Hovind fan.
Right.
I think another possibility is, like cats pissing in the house, so it's a way of marking territory.
I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe I'm being literal about this, because I'm trying to imagine, like, the Darwin's finches type thing, right? Depending on the environment you're in, the shape of your beak, the length of your legs, your posture, all those things, I can think of a reason why that would be beneficial, or why you would thrive while other variations of that species wouldn't, and reproduce and blah blah blah. I'm just trying to think of a lot of the things that humans possess that I can't imagine, like the primate who knew how to draw a circle in the sand versus the primate who didn't. Like, what would make one beneficial? Like, what would make one able to fucking make more?
So I can kind of you can visualize it, right? Like the primate that's able to draw a circle in a sand with a bunch of lines in the middle of it representing an enemy tribe, that you and your tribe with larger numbers, you draw other arrows in the sand that show where you're going to come in and slaughter them and take all their food and maybe even eat them.
But what I'm trying to say, and again, I'm being antagonistic, that's already jumping a lot of steps, like interpretation. That's and jumping to the other parts of your pod.
Right. So it starts off with, yes, there is a whole suite. Yeah. Like it is a series of stages of evolutions. Like it starts off with just being able to make sounds well enough to signal a mate. And then from there it branches out to being able to make more complex sounds that express information, as well as having a brain that's capable of receiving truth-apt information, right? So, and sometimes evolution doesn't select for a brain that's capable of receiving truth-apt information. It selects for a brain that just decides to act as if threats were present. We call that hyperactive agency detection. And that has shaped human evolution, and I think it's a big part of the reason why people believe in God. He's the specter in the bushes. He's the creature in the gaps that has a mind with no brain and is 3 in 1 at the same time, and all these other obfuscations and metaphysical, illogical paradoxes that just paralyze logical and rational thinking. Anyways, I started to ramble and bullshit there. Excuse me.
I think there is some examples of early human art which go back, I think it's in South Africa, and it goes back to maybe 80,000 years ago, something like that, of a piece of ochre, which was found with some diamond hatching on it.
Correct.
And I think that kind of shows you how early art was probably used, right? And one thing I would also say is that hunter-gatherers had a lot of time on their hands. It wasn't a stressful way of living, right? So you know, I can easily imagine someone sitting down after a meal, full meal, like by a fire, going, right, let's get some ochre on so we can go out in the sun and you know, like not suffer too much. And well, he's sitting there with his ochre thing, going, well, I'm going to leave it here, but I want to know that nobody's going to use my bit of ochre. Right, so he's going to mark it in some way, right, and go, there you go, that's mine. I'm the guy with the diamond hatching, and he leaves it in a specific place. And the interesting thing about that particular find is there are many bits of ochre found in that particular cave, and they're all specifically tucked into nooks and crannies in the rocks in specific places, and they've been there for 80,000 years or so, you know. So, or were there. So it's like you can quite easily see there's a pragmatic reason why they might start marking things, right? And then there's the sense of, well, now I'm marking something, I'm going to mark it in a specific way which is recognizable, right?
I mean, I got to be honest. The best hypothesis I've heard is a bunch of proto-humans found some mushrooms, and then they ate them and became, you know.
Can I
Don't get me wrong. I like Terrence McKenna. I just don't think the stone did.
Yeah,
can I do some speculation here?
Sure, please. Yeah.
So just to ensure that I'm understanding sort of the point that you're getting at, Chris, are you asking why is it that humans seem capable of doing all of this abstract thought when that doesn't seem immediately beneficial to our survival as creatures in the world? Something along those lines?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do is, I mean, maybe it's inappropriate to try to jam that into the more physical adaptation model, right? Because like I said, going back to the shape of the beak and all that stuff, that feels one-to-one. That feels a little bit closer to one-to-one. But when you start talking about some of our higher order executive functioning, it gets muddier and harder to kind of see that one-to-one relationship between some of our cognition and how that would have a direct benefit on, you know, kind of proliferation and all that stuff.
I wonder if it does have a direct benefit. I'm not sure if anybody's even measured those fitness values. Because maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's actually a waste of our mental energy. And that's actually one of the big drags of being a big brainer. It takes a lot of calories to run that fat, soggy brain. Right. And it doesn't always work correctly. Like there's a lot of impaired reality testing. There's delusions and straight up dementia. And yeah. It kind of behaves like what you would expect from something built by non-randomly cludging together random mutations via some form of like nature, like selecting the things that are most fit. I don't know. Somebody should come up with a name for that.
I think
that's why I spoke about downtime, by the way. Right, because it is so expensive, right? And you're not going to save, you know, you can't save energy by just not thinking. So, you know.
I think
anyway,
that
go ahead, Leo.
Certain evolutionary pressures probably led humans to developing a level of cognition that allowed us to develop tools. And then what we did is with the tools that we had and the technology we were capable of developing, we gave ourselves the ability to be able to just kind of think about stuff. We didn't have to direct all of our brain processing power at strictly surviving, which led to humans developing much more abstract areas of thought. But I also think a lot of those probably are beneficial to survival. I think that humans having mathematics has probably increased our ability to survive. I think language has done that because communication is a good thing. But some of the abstract things that humans are capable of, I would just say are not really like requisite for survival. Humans do them simply because we have the time to do those things. We don't have to, like, we have houses and cars and like look at the societies that we have. We don't have to hunt 7 hours a day and then sleep the rest of it. Like, we don't have to do all the stuff that other animals do. So the cognitive power that we have was able to be directed towards things that aren't themselves necessarily requisite for survival. And that's why I think humans do things like make music and have debates on YouTube and stuff like that.
Can I say? Can I?
Yeah, I think.
Can I
and
pose
think
one? Can I
what
pose
real-
one
a real
comment
quick-
about this though? One curiosity I do have about this is that some of these cognitive abilities, while I can see what you're saying about, like, being able to paint a nice picture doesn't do anything for us to be able to gather berries more efficiently or what the fuck ever.
Mhm.
But given the fact that we are a social species and have evolved as a social species, don't these other cognitive abilities increase our ability to function socially?
Agreed. Yeah, I would say so.
Also,
That-
just to
that feels a
mention
little
that
chicken and
the
egg.
human brain is probably, one of the last evolutionary things to happen, right? So, if we're talking about advantages that it's given us, then obviously we're not going to notice it nearly as easily as, so the, say, a bird beak, which was evolved, whatever, millions of years ago, right? As opposed to the 100,000 years that our species has evolved, let alone the hominids, which is not that long either, a couple of million years, say. So I think that also makes the thing. The argument against this intelligence thing being hereditary, I would say, goes along the same lines as well.
You know what? It just occurred to me too. There are other social species that have developed like art and communication. Like whale pods have straight up politics. They have group politics.
Yeah.
Social
Sure.
species of bees have division of labor, and there are species of bees that communicate by dancing.
Mm.
Yeah, the bee butt shake communication stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think
I
that
said that,
I don't think
Austin, and
that's
what popped
subtle.
into my head was the one scene. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show Futurama, but the one scene where they go to the space bees. And
Yeah.
if you know the show, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know the show, I'm sorry, but you just
Yeah.
and Bender's like, "Can we get out of here? I'm tired of shaking my butt for these." And then they are, and he's doing the thing, so like he's communicating to the bees, and they're all looking over like, "All right, motherfucker, I see how."
By the way, I also acknowledge that there's a lot of, I'm kind of being a little humocentric because we're humans and I understand that. But I'm very well aware that there are other creatures and their version, and they have their own. There's levels of cognition and communication we may never know, simply because we don't know what we're looking at or even how to tie into that. But something I found really interesting is I was watching a video. It was a humorous video. It was a dog looking at his master, then looking at the leash, then looking at the master, and then looking at the leash. And it struck me as how phenomenal that was, because we all know the dog was saying, "I would like to go for a walk." But you ask yourself, how did that dog know to associate the leash with the human to the walk to send that message? You know what I mean? It didn't go to the door, scratch the door. That would make sense. It didn't grab the leash and that would make sense. But there was the implication, like, you know what I want. We both know what I want. Let's do it. You know what I mean? That it blew my mind in that moment to understand that interspecies communication. And I can only imagine what other communication is happening in species that we don't even know what we're looking at, and they're doing high end or high level. So I don't want to be too like anthropocentric in this. I'm just kind of like picking
certainly with that example, right? I love there was a line in a program that talked about how dogs and humans came to work together, and the line went something like, "We're not even sure whether we domesticated dogs or dogs domesticated us."
Sure.
So it's like,
Right.
There you go. So kind of
so I wonder if
a
these
codependent relationship back in the day, right? When we were hunter-gatherers, there was an obvious advantage to using dogs to hunt. And the other thing interesting about that I found was that they said that dogs communicate with us by reading the whites of our eyes. So they literally, that's how they kind of see what we are intending, rather than know anything about language. When we call their names and stuff, they have an association of that sound,
right?
But they don't know what it means, right? They just know, if I go, I'll get something, right? So it's behavioral science rather than like.
Are we sure that it's really
what
just
I love,
at surface level with dogs?
So
What I
again,
love is that there's so much studies on dogs because it's one of the main ethnozoological species. It's one of the main species we've
closest
co-evolved
to
with.
us. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying earlier.
Are we sure that it's really just that surface level with dogs, that they don't really know what the word, or like what it means? They don't associate. I
No, I'm
guess
not sure.
like I think too many people try to restrict language and this notion of like assigning meaning to sounds strictly to humans, and I think that's just so obvious. Not that anybody here specifically has done that, but I think that's just so obviously false. I think dogs, when you say their names, the reason they respond is because they know what the sound means.
Absolutely, yeah, agreed.
Same with cats. Cats know what their names are. They don't acknowledge you the way that dogs do, just because cats are different than dogs. But they know their names, and we know this with other animals that have been kept as pets as well. When they have names associated with them, they recognize their names. I don't know why I would interpret that as them not assigning meaning to that. Like, they're talking about me.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I understand that we call it a name, right? But it's the way that we teach them what that sound is, right? We don't teach them that sound is them. We teach them that sound has a relationship to what the human wants.
Isn't that how language works?
I was thinking the same thing.
Maybe, but like when you say name, I'm saying like it's a Skinner relationship, right? It's a behavioral relationship. The dog hears the sound and knows how to behave. Right?
Yeah, it knows, like if it hears its name, it knows to come. I think
that's different
not so
to the
much
way
because
humans.
it associates the sound with like an action as much as it recognizes
Well, and I think
it's
too,
being called.
Yeah, Leo, I'm picking up what you're putting down, brother, because I think if we think about it, the name thing maybe is a little bit too confused, or not too confusing, but think about it like if you tell a dog, like you ask a dog, do you want to go to the park, or do you want a treat? Or you can even ask a dog. I've experimented this with myself because people used to say that it's the tone of your voice the dog is responding to. So I actually did some experiments. Again, this is anecdotal, so people can discount it if they want to. But once you train a dog to a certain degree, you can actually say, like, you've been a bad dog in a very sweet, loving voice, and they will look at you like, wait a minute, this isn't right. The words you're using aren't matching up with the tone of your voice. You know, you could get these responses where they understand that the words aren't matching. Because normally when you're saying your dog is being bad, you're upset, you're shit on the floor or chewed the furniture, whatever the fuck it is, and you're mad about it. You're like, that's a bad dog. But if you train the dog well enough and you're consistent with the animal, because it does require a lot of consistency, they do recognize these patterns in speech as well as the emotion, and they can separate them to a certain degree.
I'm not certain about that. I think that's the dog knows that it's done something wrong, right? I remember my dog used to get up on the counter and steal the roast meat that my mum had made. I just drag it on the floor and start nomping on it. And if you go in, right, don't have to say a word. You don't have to say a fucking word. All you got to do is look at the meat, and the dog goes and goes straight to its basket.
This could be anecdotal, but I had a dog named Sugar that was terrible at just not destroying things, and like I didn't want to stress her out and make it worse, so I got into a habit of talking shit to her for the shit she broke sweetly. Oh, Sugar, you fucking idiot, you broke the fucking door. Who's a fucking idiot that broke the fucking and she never like acted like I was chewing her out. She would love the attention, like there is it's a lot of it is your tone, and it would definitely, like, they're operating probably at a level of understanding that I would say is something like a toddler or a young child.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly what I was
confused.
I think that's a great analogy, because I think children are the same way. Your small children are definitely going to react more to the emotion than the context. They don't have the abstract ability at that point with their mental state to be able to even understand or conceptualize a lot of the ideas, so they're really basing it off of the emotion.
Well, what happens when they've previously heard the word? That's my point about Skinner's behavioral science, right? Yeah, that's how you teach babies, is by doing, right? You don't teach babies. You don't teach babies by just talking to them and going, oh look, let me reason with you. You go, look, if I say this, and this is the action that is associated with it, and they learn to that sound and that action to be associated.
Well, here's a question.
Later on, we understand that there's a big difference between those two. That's where humans have a different level of cognition, and I think that's what I'm trying to refer to when I say, things, or Leo's referring to when he talks about abstract concepts.
Well,
anyway,
let me ask you a question. In evolution, because I am very interested in the topic of consciousness. When would you say in the evolutionary process, because I'm assuming that you believe that consciousness is a physical trait, right?
Yeah, it's like an emergent property that evolves from a biological system.
So when you say emergence, you mean weak emergence or strong emergence?
Weak emergence. You get a complex enough arrangement of matter in the right order that involves some sodium and potassium ions in an electrolyte interstitial solution, and you run a current through the synapses that connect those ions, and you get like some neural activity, and we call that consciousness.
Well, everything that I look at when it comes to strongly emergence, in the examples, consciousness is always considered a strongly emergent thing, because consciousness is a fundamentally new kind of property from matter. Like when you think of matter, you think of just rocks and things that are inert, whereas consciousness is experience, right? And so when you're looking at a new kind of property in a totally different category that supposedly arises from a physical system, then you cannot in principle really describe it, except maybe tell like the story you just told, what happens. But it's not really reducible or even simulated that we can create consciousness from inert matter. That's like a strongly emergent kind of property. And my problem is I reject strong emergence. I don't have a problem with weakly emergent things, but I do have I just don't believe that if you add 0 plus a few more zeros, you get the number 3 or the number million. It's like you can't get something from nothing, as far as I understand it. So I'm just wondering how in the process of evolution, though, when did consciousness sort of kick in order for it to be weakly emergent to other, creatures?
I think it depends on what you're defining as consciousness. And I think on some level, consciousness can be defined as responsiveness to stimuli. And that's one of the essential things of what defines a living system under the current understanding of biology. So there's like basal cognition, where organisms respond to just like chemical gradients in their proximity. And then there's more derived cognition, like the kind of that bipedal hominin with a YouTube connection does.
Yeah, I see a lot of sense in that, because it would be like to redefine consciousness as something very basic and primary, like something very primordial.
Is this meatwad?
Your voice has gone a bit funny. I think you're I'm basically just going to call it. I don't think you're a proper Scotsman, Scott.
Oh, my cat
you're back.
jumped.
Okay.
Yeah, my cat jumped on my equipment over here and messed me up. No, I agree. I think
was a beautiful blooper.
Yeah, little sweet kitties. But yeah, I was just going to say that at least makes a little sense, because I kind of define consciousness as more of a fundamental property that's very basic. In other words, it's not like human consciousness or anything like that, but it's something that we can derive from, metaconscious things like human beings, for example.
I just don't know.
It's not hard to understand how that could be an evolved trait from something more, primary or something more simple, right?
Yeah, but could you give me a definition of consciousness which includes those things?
Yeah, like I would say that my definition of consciousness is just basic awareness, like what the philosophers would call phenomenal consciousness, where it's kind of just a natural state, like pretty neutral. And then you have meta consciousness, which is like all the thinking and doing all the things that people do, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure you just give me a definition of consciousness there then, but I don't know. If you think that it's just awareness, right, then there should be no distinction between meta and non-meta, right?
No, because I would, well, maybe I would say that maybe what the word I should use is like,
I mean, you're saying my hand is conscious because I can feel things.
No,
right?
no. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. I would just say that I don't think that rocks are conscious or anything like that. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Like my liver, my bones are conscious, or I think my brain is doing consciousness. It's doing what the mind does, right? Brain.
Why is it that brains possess consciousness but rocks do not?
Yeah, so that's for me. If I'm going to take an idealist perspective, I would say it's because that's how consciousness always expresses itself, through integration of information. Whenever there's enough information that's integrated in such a way, to the degree that it is, then consciousness will express itself according to that system. But a rock does not have integrated information. It's not integrating information in any meaningful way.
It doesn't have the.
Wait, how do we know that it's not doing that?
It doesn't.
I'm just assuming that.
Because it doesn't have the
rocks are
potassium and sodium ions, right? It doesn't have the axons and the neurons and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, that's my view. I think brains possess consciousness because of what brains are and what they do, and that rocks don't do that, and that's why rocks are not conscious.
Right.
I also think the word consciousness is a convenience, because I think consciousness can describe a lot of things that include things that we can't perceive and we don't know. So that's why we say the rock doesn't have consciousness. They might have something that is so rock centric that they have their version of consciousness. That
Aristotle thought they did.
It sounds like woo. Yeah, it sounds like woo woo. I think all we can talk about is like when
it's wrong then.
Right. No, what I'm trying to say is we as humans, we have a kind of a human centric consciousness, and I think that's good because that's functional and that's practical.
Yeah, of course.
But I also think that it's possible. If I'm trying to think of a definition of consciousness that can't be applied abstractly to other things, but we can't, because then the words lose their meaning. I hope I'm not babbling, but you understand what I'm saying? Like, I think we need a functional definition.
There's a conceivability problem there.
Yeah.
You can't conceive of anything other than a human type of consciousness, and so it's hard to really talk about anything like that.
I can conceive of dog consciousness.
Yeah, I can too. I don't mean just strictly human. You know what I mean? Like, I can't conceive of rocks being conscious, or I can't conceive of. I'm not saying that makes it not true.
Yeah, because consciousness isn't actually a verb. It's just or a noun rather. It's a bunch of mental activity. Yeah. It's all verbs. And so it's not like a noun. It's not a thing like that.
Consciousness needs to be treated. Consciousness needs to be treated less like a property and more like a process. Consciousness isn't something like the heart, like it's an object or an organ. It's something more like digestion. It's something
relabeling
that organs do.
But that's just relabeling, right?
And
relabeling what?
Sorry. Yeah, you're just relabeling a process. I mean, that's what this whole thing of AI, sentient AI, the worry that AI systems will be conscious. Look, they went ahead and simulated every neuron in the connectome of a fruit fly. Mm-hmm. And after they did that, they said there's a series of tests we can run to see if the thing acts like a fly and if it experiences, responds in the like ways. Mm-hmm. Well, they did all that, and no one thinks that fruit fly is conscious. Just because it does the same processes doesn't mean that it's going to be conscious. It's kind of like the simulation fallacy. You think that, well, if I build a simulation of a kidney on my desktop, I can expect that my computer is going to pee on my desk. No one really thinks that, because we know there's a difference between simulating processes and actually the real thing,
Yeah. But I don't think consciousness is a simulation. I think it's an actual process that occurs in actual organs.
I think it's expressed through a process, obviously, but I think consciousness, I look at it like sort of what's fundamental to information that's integrated. In other words, I don't think that I have consciousness. I think that I am consciousness. That's really what it boils down to. All the processing is what's going to give me a narrative, like my name, my history, my values, all of these things, which are transient. Those things come and go, they change. But the real identity of who I am, I think who everybody is just an experience. You just experience a human life. You know, you're just integrated information that we call a human body.
Yeah,
Daniel motherfucking Leroy.
We're not getting anywhere with that though, Scott, right? You're not really making the similarity argument for why you think that consciousness is an inherent property of the universe.
Well, the main issue, I think the main issue is that physicalism obviously fails. That's the one thing.
Where does it fail?
Hang on a minute. That would be an argument from ignorance, but
where does it fail? It fails,
well,
where?
It fails to explain. Have you ever heard of the hard problem of consciousness?
Yeah, I don't think there is a hard problem of consciousness. I think the concept of a hard problem of consciousness begs the question against physicalism by presupposing before it's been shown that there is a fundamental difference between mind stuff and physical stuff, that which physicalism can't gap before they've shown that there is a difference and therefore a gap that physicalism needs to jump, which I don't think has been shown.
Well, I mean,
and just to say also, look, even if physicalism is wrong, it doesn't show that this consciousness is fundamental. Anyway,
right? Well, yeah, that's not what I'm arguing at all, right? Like,
I hope not.
I'm just pointing out that there's a reason that I think that the hard problem is just a bad question. Like, I agree. I think that the hard problem is just a limitation of our concepts. I think, and that's because of the way that consciousness is described. If you set it up for failure, it's no wonder that it's never going to explain the things you need it to explain.
Yeah, but that's the very question we asked you in the first place was, well, how are you defining consciousness, right? And if you set it up for success, the same thing applies, right? So the question is, what is the thing which makes the consciousness of the human mind the same as the consciousness of the universe, or what's the similarity? And when you trivialize it and say awareness, right, which is a nothing burger word, right? Well, what do you mean by awareness? We're just going to go down this line of ever evolving words which have, which basically beg the question. Then I'm not sure there's an interesting discussion to be had, right? So is awareness just response to a gravitational field, for instance? I don't know. It could be.
I don't think it's that. I think it's very simple. I think that
go ahead.
We understand what awareness is because it's the number one thing that we're familiar with. Now it's ineffable.
That's because we're conscious.
Well, hold on just a second. I just want to be clear to say that, consciousness, when we describe any experience, it's ineffable. We have words and we hope that people can relate to our experiences to understand them at least. But at the end of the day, when we describe something like experience or awareness or consciousness, whatever word you want to use there, it is ineffable. But
I just want to know which word you could use, right? Which
I go towards phenomenal consciousness.
Right. So then again, that's not really saying anything phenomenal, right?
But it is.
Well, no, you're begging the question again. You're just saying, well, consciousness is something that is conscious.
No, when you say begging the question, how is my definition of consciousness to be said phenomenal consciousness? How is that begging any question?
Well, if you're thinking that this because it's phenomenal, right? It's therefore fundamental.
No, I haven't got there yet. I'm just giving you you asked for a simple definition.
Okay, yeah. What's your definition?
My definition is phenomenal consciousness, which equals what experience feels like the redness of red, the taste of coffee, awareness.
Right. So that
oftentimes called qualia.
Sure, but that requires a consciousness in order to have those, right?
Well, that
You're
is
saying
consciousness. That's what I'm
consciousness
saying.
is consciousness. So you're
Right,
saying
and that's why I would
conscious,
frame it.
consciousness. If I were to rephrase the phenomenal consciousness.
Well, that's like saying, what is entanglement? Entanglement is entanglement. Entanglement is a fundamental property, just like you could say gravity.
Yeah, but
you could say
it's
spin, charge. I mean, at some
it's not
point,
defined. It's not defined by the word entanglement, though.
well, I mean, it's what we point to. The language points to something that we identify as what
Absolutely.
we consider a fundamental property because it can't be reduced.
Right. Right, but
So-
it has a definition which doesn't include the word entanglement, right?
Well, I mean, just being charitable, I think Scott's just kind of giving a general colloquial understanding of consciousness is like the awareness of the quality of one's experience.
Right.
Something like that. I
I'm
mean,
just giving you my definition.
Yeah.
By the
You
way,
can
just
tear it apart all you want. That's fine. But I'm just saying that if consciousness is, I would say consciousness is the experience of what it's likeness. That's how I'm defining it.
What it's like to be conscious.
What it's like.
no, what it's like to
anything.
experience.
What it's like
something.
to be. Beingness, you could
To
say.
experience,
Consciousness is
right.
beingness.
How do we know what we experience? Because we use our consciousness, right?
By the way, just
How do we know? Are you
Yeah.
saying that? Well, it is kind of absurd to say that to doubt that I'm conscious seems the prerequisite to doubt is consciousness.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's
agreed.
kind of an
But-
absurdity on my view.
Yeah, no, agreed, and that's why I want to know about the fundamental nature of consciousness. If it's not applied to a brain,
Yeah,
is there
and
anything?
to be-
Is there anything in your view that is a brain, that is not a brain, but is conscious?
Not that I know of. Nope.
Okay, that's fine. We're on the same lines anyway. That's
Yeah.
great.
That's
this is
definitely
so-
a non-dualist position.
Yeah, this is
Well,
a-
idealism. I think Scott's an
non-dualist-
idealist, and idealism isn't a dualist position.
Right. Exactly. I'm going for a non-dualist understanding.
so
I was
have-
assuming you were some type of idealist, but
So this is just a thought, just a question, general question. So would you say that like those kind of like those microorganisms that just respond to pH and temperature and blah blah blah, would you say that they have their version of a consciousness, even if they don't have what you might call a brain? I'm just curious, just throwing that out there.
I would call it basal cognition.
Okay.
Mhm.
But can we call that consciousness? I guess under
I personally would not call
It
it that.
definitely wouldn't pass the mirror dot test, right? Like if you could
Yeah.
hold a mirror in front of it and put a dot on its forehead, it wouldn't
It's
try to wipe it off.
Yeah, but
Would
there's
you
lots
say-
of animals that I think have consciousness.
Or
that-
shit,
that-
maybe it would, because that dot is going to be ink, which is a chemical. It might respond to that gradient. I don't know.
Yeah, like
I mean, I think it's kind of a stretch to characterize. Not that anybody, I think, specifically did this,
Right.
but I think it would be a stretch to characterize something like chemotaxis as any form of
Right.
awareness or
Yeah.
experience.
I'm just asking the question.
going
I'm
on.
not really trying to promote my view right now, but I
No,
was
no,
just asking, like, would
That
you
would
say
be
something like
the
basal?
specific field of science that studies things like that is called basal cognition. So I think there is
Mhm.
some merit to calling it some form of cognition.
Okay, so you would say it was in the family of consciousness, maybe.
Yeah, it's like one of the behaviors that the modern version of consciousness evolved through, right? Like pack hunting, right? Like that would have been an earlier version of the consciousness that humans have now. When we were
What is
that
the
kind of,
simplest? What would
Okay,
you say is the simplest?
I think
you-
the chemotaxis, like that's really close to as simple as it gets.
Mm.
Austin, you've lost me again. Are you saying that there is something that has awareness that is not a brain?
I don't think there's anything that it has awareness without a physical substrate, and that physical
agree.
substrate is almost
Right.
always going to be some kind of brain.
A brain or some sort of like
Something-
neuronal system.
Exactly, Leo.
Right,
But not
no,
all
Also,
systems-
since I'm the
take
one
no,
that
it's-
introduced the term, I just want for people who might not know what it means, because I apologize. Sometimes I have a tendency to introduce terms that I don't then define because the people that I'm talking to on the stage know what chemotaxis is. But for those who don't, chemotaxis is where an organism responds to a chemical gradient such that it follows that gradient by responding to the differences in the amount of chemical in the environment.
Mhm.
Well, like I would say, like E. coli, Paraceum, amoebas, I guess, could fall into that. That they sort of show basal cognition. Whether they have like a
that would
really
be one
rich
of the
awareness.
main categories, basal cognition studies. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that makes sense to me. Like I can get behind that because my whole thing is the hard emergence. That's what I reject. The strong emergence rather. But
I don't think strong emergence is very popular amongst philosophers of mind.
Yeah, this is interesting. I wanted to mention that, like,
usually some form of weak emergent.
Yeah, I kind of just think everything is weakly emergent.
Weakly emergent, yeah, but not strongly emergent. That's my problem.
I have to claim ignorance. I'm not sure what the
could someone make the distinction for us between strong and weak emergence?
This is one of Leo's areas of expertise, I think.
Okay.
So strong emergence is this idea. So let me give a rough outline of what generally philosophers mean by emergence, and I'm going to use it by an example, because if I just talk about the concept of supervenience, that's probably going to cause problems itself. So imagine a 1,000-piece puzzle. You put the pieces of the puzzle together and you get a picture. Let's say it's a picture of, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
That image of the Eiffel Tower emerges out of the puzzle pieces. When we say it emerges out of them, what we mean is that when you get enough of the puzzle pieces together in the right way, you get a picture of the Eiffel Tower. But the picture of the Eiffel Tower is not on any one of the individual puzzle pieces. You put those pieces together, and out of that comes a picture of the Eiffel Tower. So that's sort of this idea of what emergence is. Pictures emerge out of the puzzle pieces. Strong emergence is the idea that what emerges out of it in a way that entirely novel structures or systems that are not reducible to the lower level arise from that. Whereas weak emergence says you might get some new structures, but they should still be reducible to those underlying more fundamental aspects. You should still be able to explain it fully in terms of that more underlying level. Whereas strong emergence would say you're getting novel things that cannot be accounted for strictly in terms of that more underlying level. And that's a distinction that was made by David Chalmers, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he brought up the problems. There's like the causal closure problem with strong emergence, that same explanatory gap problem that Leo was talking about, and the issues of predictability. You know, you can't simulate what it's going to actually do. So the alternative is always weak emergence that we can trust. We always see that, the wetness of water, the fire triangle, you know, nothing experiential is added. It's all just physical stuff doing physical stuff, right? So that's weak emergence.
I have a question for Leo here then. Would you say that chaos describes weak emergence or strong emergence when taken from the ground up?
It depends on the context that we mean when we talk about chaos.
Chaos theory, mathematics, chaos theory. So order comes from this sort of...
I think that would probably, to me, I would say that's probably going to be some sort of weak emergence, because all those emergent features, I think, can be fully accounted for in terms of whatever underlying variables or what have you that you're...
Right, but you're not going to know what the variables are, right? So you're just going to see a load of data points, and at some point...
Why wouldn't you know what the variables are?
Well, you might not, right? In the hypothetical I'm putting here, all you're seeing is the points arriving one after another.
See, the problem,
and then eventually you're going to see the fractal that comes from it.
Yeah, but see that's the problem I have with strong emergence is always I'm suspicious. It's almost like you want to believe something, so you just say, well, one day we'll find out that God is true. Just be patient. But we know it's true for now. One day we'll figure it out. You know, that I don't I don't go along with that kind of mentality, because that's kind of like wishful thinking. If we're going to be truly scientific, you want to build on things you know exist, to be more parsimonious. You know, we don't want to like introduce a whole lot of what ifs.
That's why I think chaos theory is a good example of this emergence. I did want to push slightly further on it to find out whether, if you think you just have the data, right, at what point the fractal emerges, or you can recognize that there is a fractal to emerge from it, is going to be the emergent feature.
Yeah.
And then you could say that understanding the equation behind it, of why that pattern of dots represent this particular equation, that could be described as hard.
Well, yeah, and I agree in principle. Like, the more data you have, the more data we have, the more we can kind of piece together how these things emerge from chaos theory. Chaotic systems, I guess, are deterministic.
It's an analogy, right? So let's not run down that too far. That's my point here.
Right. Well, I'm just agreeing with you. I'm just agreeing that, if they are rule based, like they're deterministic, then yeah, you would expect that if we just get more information, maybe a lot of these pieces could be fit. But I guess until that happens, until such time, I guess the time to believe stuff is when you have the evidence, the sufficient evidence for it.
I got to switch out my laundry. I'll be right back.
I think a good analogy, to go back to the, not an analogy, a question I might have is going back to the Eiffel Tower puzzle, is when we think about things like, I'll expand a little bit. When we think about things that are true, I'm going to murder the analogy here. Are we looking at the puzzle pieces and saying that these puzzle pieces end up here, or do we look for puzzle pieces that build the picture we're looking for? And that sounds like epistemology on some level. But I think having this conversation about consciousness, for example, right? If I said to you, can you prove the existence of consciousness, to most people, they're like, I don't know, the fact that we're having this conversation, that's consciousness, or we recognize this organisms that respond to blah, blah, blah. But how can we prove that in certain material, I guess, if saying that humans and organisms are material, but we can't prove consciousness or disprove consciousness in others, because rocks aren't having these conversations that we can perceive of?
I think we can prove consciousness in some sense. Here is one hand.
Okay, but okay, I'm not sure what that means.
That's experiential knowledge. So
that's a disproof of empiricism, I think. Not empiricism, idealism. Sorry.
That
what is
you think you can disprove anything in philosophy, Simos?
Yeah.
I think there have been several attempts, shall we say, over the centuries to show that idealism is a stretch.
I mean, that sounds like personal incredulity.
Okay.
I mean, that's like me saying, "Oh, it's a stretch that consciousness can come from matter." Dead matter. I would never say that science disproved that or proved it one way or the other. I think it's just an open question. So,
gentlemen, I am going to have to step in. My wife is starting to wonder if we're going to be eating dinner sometime in the next 24 hours. So I should probably start to wind it down a little bit. This is such a great conversation. If I don't say something now, it's going to keep going. So what I want to do, because I like to give everybody a chance to have a final word, and that usually takes quite a bit of time by the time we get through everybody. So, what we're going to do is I see looks like Leo stepped away for a minute, so we'll wait for him. But Scott, why don't you go ahead and just go first? Well, maybe we'll work our way around the room and in a clockwise fashion. So we'll have Scott go first, and then Simos, and then Leo if he's back, and then Chris, and then we'll let our guest speaker today, Austin, have really the last say, and then we'll shut it down. And I do hate to interrupt, because this is a great conversation, and I do hope you guys come back to continue this conversation, but I do need to be somewhat responsible with the rest of my life outside of YouTube here. So Scott, why don't you have the floor, brother? And thank you for stopping by. It's always nice to see you here.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, so I have my own channel called The Mirror Point, and I discuss different theories of mind. I kind of lean towards idealism, but I have it I put it in its place. It's just a hypothesis or a model. I don't take any of this stuff too serious, but it is something that kind of keys my interest. I do kind of identify as non-dualist, oftentimes called non-duality. It's just the view that reality is fundamentally one thing, not divided into more than two separate kinds of things. So in philosophy, it's kind of a response to views like mind versus matter, subject versus object, self versus world. And I get into all that kind of stuff. I know that it's probably a minority position, which is
monism is the word that a lot of philosophers would
Sorry,
use.
Leo, you weren't here.
Yeah.
Sorry, Leo, you weren't here. This is I know you stepped away. I'm sorry. We're doing final statements for everybody to give everybody a last word because I got to shut the stream down. So this is just a chance for everybody to kind of have an uninterrupted moment here. Sorry about that. I know he wasn't here to sorry, Scott. Usually you get to speak uninterrupted.
No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, it's monism. Yeah, that's right. That's another way to look at it, like one substance. But here the core idea is there's only one fundamental reality, and all apparent distinctions would arise within it. So non-dualism is saying one underlying reality that appears as both. So you see dual properties and dualistic things. And in a sense, I'm a dualist too, because that's where you derive all your meanings and challenges and anything else that you can observe in the world. So in one relative sense, I'm a dualist, but on a fundamental sense, I tend to lean towards non-dualism in that case. But anyways, yeah, I talk about that stuff on the channel. It's called The Mirror Point. Come by every day, 12 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon. I usually have the open stage and everybody gets up and we debate and we talk and we react to videos and all that good kind of stuff. So anyways, that's who I am. Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
It's nice to see you stop by, brother. Thank you for the support.
It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Yes, sir. You too.
Simos, this is your chance to go ahead and plug your channel. Let everybody know. Make sure you guys subscribe to Simos' channel. I will be sure to get a link to his channel in the description here.
Yeah, I think I did this spiel earlier, so being British, I don't feel I should do that again. But I will just say thank you for the conversation. It's always interesting. I think this is a really difficult topic to talk about consciousness, just because I think that's particularly ill-defined, and I think what Chalmers is referring to when he says the hard problem is literally just a scientific problem. So I don't think it's that hard. I just think it's complicated, and the science hasn't been done yet, since neuroscience is a relatively new science. And I'm having every hope that it will be sorted in time. Probably comes down to, it comes down to, well, I would say in my epistemology, it comes down to evolution. So I don't think that things that aren't evolved to a particular level, of at least have a particular level of, what's the word I'm looking for, nervous system, a particularly evolved in nervous system, are just not going to be conscious. And that includes things like plants and just lots of things that don't have nervous systems. So I think that some life just isn't conscious, and that's just how that is. I definitely disagree with dualists and idealists. So I just don't see any good arguments for those particular points of view, other than saying I'm just going to define it into exist, or define the position into existence, and say that mind is fundamental because we can't explain particular things. And I think idealism suffers from the gaps issue as much as God does. And so I just find that somewhat difficult as a skeptic. But that is my presuppositions. I will fully admit that. So I'm not saying that philosophy is going to disprove those positions necessarily. But I do think I do think Dr. Samuel Johnson had it right when he said, in response to George Berkeley's idealism, he said, he kicked a stone and said, I refute it thus, to show that actual physical experience in the real world from reality and sense data is going to be the way that you refute such things. So I think that that's plausible. I'm not saying it is necessarily a proof against, but I think it's plausible.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry to be interrupted. Yeah, so much of what you said there, I agree with that. Berkeley, when he comes to the Berkeleyan idealism when it comes to, I believe, what's referred to as the continuity problem. So then he just asserts God, and there you have a God of the gaps. God's consciousness keeps everything together when we walk out of the room. That's what, So as soon as he made that claim, I think philosophy just basically stopped taking that seriously at that point, at least the way he was presenting it. Now, not to say that idealism or non-dualism isn't taken seriously in philosophy, but I think Berkeley kind of lost the plot there when it came down to, oh, well, God does it, because obviously that's just a fallacious way to argue. But at any rate, there's Simos. I was trying to wind down last night after the debate, and I made the mistake of turning on the Raging Tomatoes channel and saw you popped up there. Yeah, I did. So then, of course, I was watching and enjoying what you had to say. That lady, Sarah, she is so nice. She actually gave me a shout out last night. I don't know if you were there when she
I was, yes.
Yeah, it's really humbling to have somebody who's that popular call me out and ask me to come join the panel. The truth is every time she's on, I'm so tired from work, or whatever I've been doing. I just don't have the energy for it. But I do need to get back up there because it's an honor to be well thought of by somebody like Sarah and her panel members and stuff. And so I need to take advantage of that and probably get some exposure for my own channel. But I enjoyed seeing you up there. I did. I was like, oh, Simos is here. I might as well watch for a little while.
I just want to address Leo, actually, just to say that when I was on there, Leo, I don't know if you remember her, but Jen was on there. Do you remember Jen from Church of Entropy? Yeah, and she's completely changed her position. What I like about Jen is that she's always has a thought through position. So you can always talk to her and question her on what it is. And so to hear that she's changed from this physics idea to this non-dualist idea was quite interesting.
She's a smart lady. That was my first time listening to her talk. She was a smart lady. I was actually really impressed with her.
Yeah, and she's always thoughtful. She's always thoughtful. So.
Oh, you can tell she's put a lot of time and energy into that. I'm not saying I agree with her position. Some of that stuff is a little bit over my head. I do understand the basics of the physics, but it got pretty deep pretty quick. But
most of it was over my head as well. I'd hardly heard of some of the stuff she was talking about. So
can I ask some of the things that she brought up?
Hinduism, non-dualist Hinduism.
I don't know what that has to do with physics, but okay.
No, I'm saying hang on. I'm saying she's changed her position. So she's now talking about other ideas, right? Or at least expanding the Hinduism ideas of non-dualism into physics.
You should go back and watch the stream, Leo. It sounds like you probably follow a lot of the conversation, actually. And
not necessarily physics, more chemistry, actually.
Chemistry, yeah. So Leo, this is your chance here, brother. So the way I do this, I know you had stepped away. I don't know if you heard or not, but I like to give everybody a chance to have a final word, just so they can speak uninterrupted. And I'm really grateful that you stopped by the channel for the first time. I'll make sure to get a link to your channel in the description of the video. I try to promote everybody who's supporting my efforts to do kind of the networking thing and show my gratitude to you guys for stopping by and helping me build content and stuff like that. So I will get your link to the description of this video sometime after it posts. But please feel free to, tell people about who you are, what your channel's about, or whatever you'd like to say with your final word.
I'm Leo Filius. I do physics and philosophy are hard, and I'm here to help. So if those things interest you, you can go check out my channel. We've been talking a lot about consciousness stuff. Actually, my most recent live stream that I just did this past Friday was on this. I was responding to Emerson Green, who's an agnostic and a panpsychist, and he's got really good content. People should go check out his channel. He did a stream with professional philosopher Ralph Stefan Ware, who I don't know if he is a substance dualist, but he's certainly amicable to the position. And they were talking about the interaction problem and how they don't think it's really this big problem. And I responded by showing that it still is very, very much a big problem for non-physicalist views about the mind. Maybe not so much idealism, just because of the way that idealism is laid out. The interaction problem wouldn't really be much of an objection to that view. But for non-physicalist interactionist views of consciousness, like say a substance dualism, or maybe even a panpsychism, are certainly going to be stopped in their tracks by something like the interaction problem. So if that interests anybody, you can go check that out.
Thank you so much for stopping by. I have seen that actually quite a bit happen in conversation where people are flipping that on its head and then claiming that they've solved the interaction problem simply by just simply flipping the argument on its head. And to me, I'm thinking either I'm not smart enough to figure out how that's worked, or they're just asserting that they've solved the problem without actually solving it. So it's interesting for me to hear you say that, and that does line up with what I'm seeing as well. It's so nice to have you stop by today, brother. Thank you so much. And Chris, I really want to highlight you here for a second because, brother, I am so grateful for your composure today. You did, everybody, actually, to be honest with you guys, Austin, you did actually, you maintained your composure as well. But Chris, you were really, you did such a fantastic job of kind of just trying to stick to the argument that you were making and being honest about it and being direct without being aggressive. You were very direct, and you really kept to your guns, and you recognized that your argument was kind of being passed over. And instead of, getting aggressive and trying to really, meet the energy that was being given to you, you just rose above it. I was really impressed with the way you handled that. I think you set a great example for everybody. I'm so grateful that you came by today. So let me give you the stage here. Now that I've probably embarrassed you in front of everybody, but I'm just really thankful that you came by today.
I'm turning red. You should say it. Yeah. I'm. It's becoming my tagline. I don't really have a channel. I don't really have an expertise in anything. I guess if I do have a brand, it's that I'm like a layman, just kind of coming in asking what I think are practical, common sense questions. And I think a lot of times my arguments are based on, at best, undergrad levels of science and undergrad levels of philosophy and stuff like that. And I feel like that's where the meat of a lot of very interesting conversations are being had, is at that place of just basic fundamental, like, why do we know what we know, how we know, and stuff like that. But I'm also infinitely interested in some of the higher end, we say higher end, more sophisticated arguments and debates that are being had by people who really know their stuff backwards and forwards. And as I've said before, but I'm also losing my patience with people who don't want to do the basic homework of understanding how. I'll use evolution as an example. They don't want to do the basic homework of what evolution as a word means, for example. Like, they'll argue, they keep bringing it back to like the origin of life thing, where they're like, well, if you can't prove that we all came from pond scum, then all of a sudden we have to throw out everything else that's implied with evolution, right? So for some reason, they'll accept selective breeding. They'll select antibiotic resistance, resistant bacteria. They'll accept all those things that we build so many foundations, biological foundations on. But because from their definition, if we can't say definitively where that Luca came from, or that Luca existed, or whatever, then somehow, some way, that evolution falls apart, while simultaneously acknowledging that there's evolution everywhere else, everywhere around us. And then they parse that up again to say, oh yeah, no, that's microevolution. And as if to say that, like, oh, that's a pixel on a TV screen. I'll acknowledge the pixel, but I won't acknowledge the TV screen, right? Or the image on the TV screen. And that gets very frustrating, because I understand that no logical, reasonable, information thirsty person is going to take that approach, right? And even in my challenge, not my challenge, my fake challenge to Sims, was that, like, can you explain to me how consciousness arrived? To me, that was a genuine, honest question. And had he given me an honest and general, and which he gave me, a lot of people did, it just, for me, that's where the interesting conversations are coming from. And I'm just getting bored of the people saying, well, the eye is irreducibly complex, and therefore Adam and Eve ate an apple, and that's why we're all sinners, and that's why where death and disease comes from, is because of our inherent wickedness and stuff like that. Like, that's boring. That means nothing to me. And also, just, I'll say this really quickly, I'm also not impressed by the well-mannered, polite, please and thank you people who are saying atrocious things, but they're saying it, with the right civil grace, social graces. I also get impatient of that, because I think authoritarianism and racism and kind of elitism can, the latest trick they've learned is to wrap themselves in civility, and then they intentionally try to make us, and I'll say us, you decide if we're an us, seem like we're the irrational, ranting and raving ones. They'll go to a college campus and they'll trigger an immature college student, and then because they're smiling and waiting their turn, that looks like, from the appearance, that looks like they're bringing the more rational and reasonable argument. Meanwhile, it's just they know how to behave themselves. So I guess maybe this is my push to also say that a person being well mannered and a person being able to articulate themselves well does not a good debate make. It just means that they've learned how to camouflage their illogic or their irrational arguments behind please and thank you, right? And even that's starting to wear thin on me. So anyway, so if you want to check out more of my stuff, there really isn't much, but periodically I'll throw something up on my channel, and maybe I might throw up something later tonight because I have thoughts. But again, once again, OE, thank you so much for the times you've given me a platform, and thank you so much for having these open forums, because I do think there's a lot of great conversations being had because of the space you're creating. So I definitely have to tip my hat to you and say that you're doing amazing stuff here. And I just really hope that if there's people watching this, that they really are walking away with something useful and practical to evolve their thinking. All right. So that's it.
Well, I'm really humbled by those kind words, brother, and I am grateful for that. But the truth is I try to be very conscientious about not calling it my channel, because I actually do believe it is the community's channel. It's your guys' channel as much as it is mine. You guys are as much responsible for the good and the bad, to be honest with you. We all have a responsibility because we're all putting ourselves out there. And so I do believe this channel, we're coming up on like 250 subs, pretty close to that, and sometimes somewhere around 20,000 views on the videos. And I don't even have 60 videos out yet. I've been doing it for a few months, but I only do it once a week. And so it's growing very quickly for not doing any kind of marketing or advertising. And the reason it's growing is because it's a community effort. It's not because of something I'm doing particularly. So for any good that would, accolades or whatever you want to call it that might come my way, the truth of the matter is it really gets spread out between everybody who participates. And so you get as much of that credit for that as anybody else here, Chris. So you're really adding to the content of what we're doing here. And I think it is a huge benefit. I agree with you. The whole purpose of starting this channel was because as much as I have my own thoughts about things, I think when I look at the world around me, I think it's extremely important for us to try to unify and to be more aware of the fact that we are one species and we are sharing one planet, and we've got to take that more seriously. And I think what happens is people get so caught up in their differences, and they start othering groups, and this becomes so problematic because they value those differences more than they value the people. And that's the problem. I think we should celebrate differences and celebrate different ideas. You know what I mean? And this is, we don't want to live in a world where everybody agrees on every single thing. Trust me, we do not want that. There are some very basic things that we should agree on, which is humanity and environmental responsibility. But everything builds up from there, right? So, no, thank you much for the kind words and for being here, brother. We're going to turn it over to Austin, who was our guest speaker today. And I just want to thank him so much for taking so much time out of his day away from his family and everything else. He's a very busy guy. So thank you, Austin. The floor is yours, brother.
Hello, everybody, and farewell again. Thank you for listening to me. I am a white guy with good hair, which apparently means the ceiling is pretty much the limit for me. To be fair to myself, I do feel like I'm a lot better at responding to science deniers than a lot of other people. I've seen other people try, and I feel like I can do better than a lot of them. So that's why I'm doing this. I am currently the guy with decent hair looking at you, talking to you, but sometimes I'm just a picture with a voice coming out of it. But that picture's connected to a reptiliomorphin, amniotic, synapsid, propagnathan, hominoid hominid, hominin, who is really concerned about like the spread of misinformation. It not even spread, maybe spread is the wrong. It's more like turbo cancer that's skull fucking us into oblivion. Like maybe that's a more appropriate way to put it. And so this guy, this ape that's attached to this voice that you hear coming from the picture on your YouTube, he's concerned about planetary mortality. He's concerned about declining education standards, erosion of democracy, pandemics and quarantines and food insecurity and biodiversity loss. And so I'm out here just like trying to increase the human collective IQ, the human collective intellect on these subjects by talking about it and trying to get good information out there. I realize that there are people in this world who are like never going to get the chance to talk to a real scientist. They got to go based on what they get from TV and tabloids and advertisements, which, trust you me, that doesn't really go well for good science. So I try to do my best. I don't claim to be a font of infinite knowledge, but I've done a lot of my homework, and I've put a lot of that homework up on my YouTube channel to allow you to inoculate yourself against all kinds of scourges of misinformation with just a little bit of basic curiosity and the willingness to spend some free time, like just putting one of my videos on in the background while you fold your laundry or sweep your floors or do your dishes. And those are covering all kinds of subjects, probably subjects you agree with, probably subjects you disagree with. The Earth's not flat. Evolution is real. Vaccines work. Climate change is happening. We landed on the moon, and it's probably not a good idea to drink your own pee-pee or eat your own feces, regardless of what some moron on YouTube tells you. And believe me, there are morons on YouTube telling people those last two things. I know that's hard for people to believe sometimes, but there are morons people telling those things, and there are morons believing it. So do your best to make sure you don't end up being one of those morons who's feasting on your own waste and giving yourself lots of E. coli because some dude bro who thinks Joe Rogan is a scientist said some nonsense on social media. And basically that's the main point. If I can get anybody to take away one main point from my video, like ideally you would take away a whole host of points from this video, but if you take away one point, let it be the pipeline of misinformation that exists out there, a pipeline that gets off at many insane destinations. It gets off at the Holocaust denial destination. It gets off at the Civil War history revisionism destination. And there are even people that get off at the drinking their own pee-pee destination. So keep in mind, be aware of that thing that exists out there, and do some skepticism and be curious and use empiricism and rationality and humanism and harmony and objective motherfucking ethics. So let me close this out by saying to Robin fucking Webster, Simos fucking Funk, Sean the fucking non-fucking duelist, it has been great talking with all you. I hope I made this both informative and educational and entertaining enough to absorb for everybody. And yeah, Daniel fucking Leroy, take us home.
Hey, brother, that was outstanding, man. It was very entertaining, actually. And, you know, Austin, I got to tip my hat to you. I think you did a great job keeping things under control. I know that you and the gentleman, Joseph, you guys were talking over each other a bit, but there was no yelling or screaming. Like you were speaking directly and stuff like that. But the only issue is you guys were talking at the same time, which made it impossible to figure out what's going on. But as far as like the energy level, I thought you did a great job. And you did. I didn't think you took anything personally, and I think there were a few darts thrown, to be honest with you. And I think you just let it just ignored it basically. And I think you did a fantastic job. Your presentation was very informative. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed going through those slides with you. And I'm grateful that you sent me those, because that's something that I now have that I can use as study material moving forward. And I've already looked them over 3 times, and now I've got the presentation with your explanation. I can map onto that. So you've done me a huge service. I owe you a debt of gratitude. And am I correct in thinking that you're going to be one of our featured guest speakers at the protest?
I spoke last year. I'll probably speak this year.
That would be awesome. So for those of you who didn't hear, we're promoting the Ark Encounter protest. I've got a link to the PayPal description link to the PayPal account in the description of this video. And please do, if you can afford to make a donation. I'm very grateful for that, but you're not required or obligated to. If you're having financial difficulties, believe me, I understand. We've all been there. So I don't want anybody to feel obligated to give more than what they can. But I am very grateful to people like Chris, who's here, who actually donated. And there's been some other people who donated that didn't want their names mentioned. But for those of you who are out there and watching, we really do appreciate that support, because it's a very important event as far as I'm concerned. It's a warehouse of misinformation and indoctrination, and it needs to be stopped. And so I think it's not going to get stopped if people don't speak out against it, right? So that's how you're supposed to use your voice peacefully. And we see a lot of protesting going on these days, and it's not always done in the right way, right? So this is a great example for people to look at. So thank you so much for stopping by. I'm going to give a quick couple final thoughts here, just really quickly, because I know you guys have been so generous with your time. This is quite a long stream, but touching on something that Chris said earlier, and I was going to mention this as well. He's absolutely right. This happens so much when I get into conversations with people about evolution, is it's goalpost shifting. Is that conversation every single time, and I'm not trying to be mean to people when I say this, but literally every time I get into a conversation with a theist, a creationist, I should say, about evolution, the goalpost always gets moved back to abiogenesis every time, and so those are two separate fields of study. Right. And I'm not the person who's qualified to break all that down for people, but do some research and understand that if you're going to talk about evolution, stick to evolution. If you think you can debunk or disprove evolution, or you've got arguments for it, stick to evolution. Right. But don't move the goalpost to abiogenesis every time the evolutionist has an answer to one of your questions. Right. Because that's what happens every single time. A creationist will bring up an objection to evolution. The question gets answered, and then they immediately retreat to abiogenesis. And that's just a fallacious way of arguing, right? So do look into the studies and be intellectually honest if you really want the truth. Because if you're a theist, there are people they believe in theistic evolution. They believe that God is the one who created everything, and he set things in motion and uses evolution as the way to create life, right? Because there's so much evidence for evolution. So you don't have to deny the evidence to believe in God. If you have to hold on to that God belief, you can have both beliefs at the same time if that's what you need to get through life. Okay. I don't think I have too much else to offer. Remember that having respect for the planet, having respect for others, and having self-respect, these are the bricks that you use to pave the road that leads to the happy life that you all want to live. We all want to live a good life, right? Thank you so much for being here, everybody.
Channel 3.30 for repeating, of course. That's better than I've done before. And Deacon Brendan, what do you do? Just wait, objective ethics will be on your plate.